We're talking about a very dangerous person that we want to get off the street.
He is a person of interest. This, would not appear to us to have been a random act between strangers.
It's to the gruesome scene Friday at the Sunport. It wasn't one body found inside that vehicle, that red truck you see there at this garage. It was four people who police say were killed. We now know their names. We know a little bit about them as well.
March 5, 2021. A strange, foul odor seeped through the concrete silence of a New Jersey parking garage. A security guard, doing a routine sweep, was drawn to a vehicle, a gray Honda CR-V, parked and long abandoned. Inside the trunk, wrapped in plastic and sealed in the stifling darkness, was a corpse, later identified as Michael Dubkovsky. That gruesome discovery kicked off a domino effect of revelations so chilling, it would expose a twisted web of killings, dismemberments, and psychological torment. But this wasn't just any killer. This was Shawn Lannon, a father, a husband, a former military man. A man who once appeared ordinary, until the facade cracked. What investigators found next would shock even the most seasoned detectives. Born in New Jersey, Shawn Lannon seemed like many young men trying to find stability in a fractured world. He served in the military and later moved to New Mexico, marrying Jennifer Lannon and starting a family. On the surface, he was a family man. Caring, composed, and quiet. But underneath that exterior was a psychological storm brewing for decades. Lannon's life began to unravel following his divorce and increasing substance abuse. Friends noticed a change, a darkness in his eyes, erratic behavior, and a loss of grip on reality. But no one could predict what that internal turmoil would ultimately become. Behind closed doors, he battled demons that would eventually push him into a state of calculated, cold-blooded violence. By the time police found Dubkovsky's body, Lannon had already crossed a line he could never come back from. Following the discovery in New Jersey, authorities quickly uncovered a horrifying trail leading back to New Mexico. In a shallow grave inside a pickup truck, 4 more bodies were discovered: Jennifer Lannon, Shawn's ex-wife, Matthew Miller, Justin Mata, and Randall Apostolon. All had been lured in, murdered, and then disposed of with chilling precision. What's even more disturbing is that some of the victims were people Shawn knew intimately. His own ex-wife. Close friends. Acquaintances. The murders weren't random. They were personal, deliberate, and deeply unsettling. When questioned, Lannon confessed to the killings and hinted at a far greater body count, claiming to have killed as many as 16 people. He said he targeted pedophiles and people he deemed evil, painting himself as a twisted kind of vigilante. But the evidence told another story, one of manipulation, power, and internal collapse. Experts soon began piecing together a psychological profile of Lannon. Traits commonly seen in serial offenders surfaced: lack of empathy, extreme manipulativeness, emotional detachment, and a disturbing ability to compartmentalize. Some professionals pointed to Lannon's alleged history of childhood sexual abuse, particularly his claim of being molested by Michael Dubkovsky.
Killed several people. He was on his way back on his own statement to harm someone else in this area. So very important to the public that we get
that trauma, compounded by years of untreated psychological instability, may have contributed to his descent into violence. But trauma alone doesn't create a killer, especially not one this methodical. What stood out was Lannon's ability to mask his intent. He maintained jobs, relationships, and appeared to function within society, all while harboring the capacity for extreme violence. His confessions weren't emotional, they were cold, calculated, even prideful. This duality, loving father on the outside, emotionless killer within, is what made him so terrifying. As the case unfolded, a troubling pattern emerged. Multiple red flags had been raised about Lannon long before the bodies were found. Police had responded to several domestic disturbances. Friends and family members voiced concerns. And yet, the justice system failed to connect the dots. One of the biggest failures? A lack of communication between law enforcement across state lines. New Mexico and New Jersey authorities weren't sharing information fast enough, allowing Lannon to travel and kill without setting off alarms. If these agencies had been more aligned, had background checks, domestic violence reports, and mental health concerns been cross-referenced, Lannon may have been stopped before the murders escalated. Instead, these gaps allowed a calculated killer to slip through the cracks and strike multiple times. It wasn't just a failure of enforcement. It was a failure of awareness. The toll on the victims' families has been immeasurable. Jennifer Lannon's relatives spoke out publicly, describing their heartbreak and confusion. She had once loved Shawn, trusted him with her life and her children's. And he repaid that trust with betrayal and brutality. For Matthew Miller, Justin Mata, and Randall Apostolon's families, the grief was compounded by unanswered questions. Why were they killed? What did they know? And could their deaths have been prevented? Communities in New Jersey and New Mexico were shaken. How could someone so seemingly normal commit such atrocities undetected? The case forced residents to reconsider their own neighbors, who they really are, and what they're capable of. Advocacy groups began pushing for reform, better mental health resources, stronger domestic violence intervention, and clearer interstate communication protocols. In custody, Lannon revealed horrifying details: how he lured his victims, how he killed them, and how he dismembered and disposed of their remains. He confessed to targeting people he believed were involved in drugs or had hurt others. But the moral justification he offered didn't align with reality. His confession wasn't about guilt. It was about control. He wanted to frame his narrative, to appear as someone on a mission rather than a murderer. But the truth lay in his actions, the calculated steps, the planning, the silence. Authorities were especially disturbed by his admission that he may have killed up to 16 people.
Hello?
Hey, is this Shawn?
Yes, it is.
Hey, Shawn, this is Detective Turney. How are you doing?
Good, how are you doing today?
Good, man. I've been trying to get a hold of you on other number, and it's not working. So,
No, I apologize. Sorry.
so you know anything new?
No, I haven't heard anything.
Okay. Are you still around town?
No, I'm in Albuquerque.
Okay. How's the kids doing?
They're doing good. They're doing good. Just yeah, upset. Okay.
Living with Dee again, or still?
Yep.
Okay.
Anywhere on your end?
No, we've made some progress here and there. I've got a bunch of pictures of different vehicles. I'd like you to take a look at and see if you could help me identify them.
Get something tomorrow. I wanted to come in and I can still have like stuff I gotta return to the school.
Okay. Tomorrow would be great. Just give me a heads up anytime.
You got it. All right, boss.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
Apologize for the phone issue. I didn't.
We're good.
The other one was technically the one left that we had. So.
Okay.
Yep. Alrighty. Apologize now.
All right. Any idea what time tomorrow?
In the afternoon, I gotta get a ride. So.
Okay.
Alrighty.
All right. Just make sure the kids are taken care of, and we'll go from there. All right. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
If true, many victims remain unidentified: transients, addicts, people on society's fringes whose disappearances may have gone unnoticed. That possibility continues to haunt investigators. Even with Lannon behind bars, sentenced to 35 years in New Jersey, the investigation is far from over. Prosecutors in New Mexico continue building their case for the 4 other murders, complicated by jurisdictional hurdles and the need for airtight evidence. Police across the country are revisiting cold cases and missing persons reports that might be connected. Forensic teams continue analyzing recovered remains, though some may never be identified due to the gruesome nature of their disposal. The question remains: how many did he really kill? And who were they? Lannon's ability to commit such heinous acts while flying under the radar underscores the frightening reality: serial killers don't always wear masks. Sometimes, they wear wedding rings and carry lunchboxes. The Shawn Lannon case will be studied for years to come, not just because of its brutality, but because of what it revealed about systemic gaps, human psychology, and the dangers lurking behind ordinary faces. It's a case that forces hard questions. How do we identify potential killers before they strike? How can law enforcement better track patterns across jurisdictions? And how do we help trauma survivors before that trauma mutates into violence? As Lannon serves out his sentence, communities remain on edge. Advocacy groups are calling for change. Families are fighting for justice. And law enforcement is left digging through a chilling possibility, that the full extent of his crimes may never be known. One thing is certain, the horror of what Shawn Lannon did will echo far beyond 2021. It is a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can grow in silence, thrive in isolation, and one day explode into tragedy. In the end, the story of Shawn Lannon is more than a tale of murder. It's a warning. That monsters don't always announce themselves. That trauma can become a ticking bomb. And that our systems, mental health, justice, community, must evolve or be doomed to let evil slip through once again. Because sometimes, all it takes to uncover a monster, is the scent of decay in a parking garage. In the end, Shawn Lannon didn't just kill people, he shattered families, silenced voices, and exposed a horrifying truth, that the most dangerous monsters don't come in masks, they come in memories. Smiling in old photographs. Tucking children into bed. Laughing at dinner tables. He was the kind of evil that grows in plain sight, hiding behind a quiet demeanor and a practiced charm. The kind of darkness no one sees, until it's far too late. We may never know how many lives he truly took. But one thing is certain, the terror he unleashed will ripple through time, forever haunting the silence he left behind. Because in the story of Shawn Lannon, the scariest part isn't the number of victims. It's how long he went unnoticed.
Oh my God. I need somebody out here. What is going on? Oh God. There's 4 people in my mama's house. Who's inside the house? My mom, my grandma, my nanny, and my stepdad.
On what should have been a quiet November morning, Amy Ord and her daughter walked across a dew-covered lawn, expecting to exchange simple morning greetings. What they stepped into was a horror no one could have prepared for, a massacre so brutal that even hardened detectives would call it one of the most disturbing crime scenes they had ever encountered. I was assigned to the Pendleton homicide case from 2015. Is Amy here? Since she made the 911 call, we'd like to talk to her, and to you, too. Inside that modest trailer, 4 people lay dead: Amy's mother Kathy, her stepfather Mike, and both grandmothers, Violet and Barbara. Each victim had been stabbed repeatedly, their throats slashed, and, chillingly, each shot twice in the head after death. The Scotts were a close-knit family in small-town Pendleton, South Carolina, a town known for its history and charm. Mike and Kathy Scott, high school sweethearts, had spent their later years caring for their aging mothers. Amy Ord, their daughter, lived just steps away in a second trailer with her new husband, Ross Vallard, and her children. This was a rare 4-generation house. The early signs didn't make sense. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no missing valuables. But one thing was immediately clear: this wasn't a random robbery. This was personal, intimate, methodical, cruel, one bound by love, but as investigators would soon learn, also burdened by resentment, jealousy, and greed. The call came in around 12:30 p.m. Deputies discovered the bodies inside the home. It was Kathy Scott's daughter who found them. The community was shaken. The sheer savagery pointed to someone close, someone trusted, and soon, all eyes turned toward Amy and Ross. There were a lot of money problems, arguments. She always talked about how her mom pulled the plug on her dad when he was in the hospital, said she hated her for that. As detectives dug deeper, more questions surfaced. Why did Amy and Ross, reportedly drowning in debt, suddenly have over $60,000 in cash, matching serial numbers to bills Mike Scott had once photographed? Why were their stories inconsistent? Why did Ross's shoes, ASIC Speed Stars, match a bloody footprint found inside the crime scene? And why, if Ross never entered the house that night, did surveillance footage show him wearing those very shoes? I don't know what happened to those shoes. But if I did something like that, would I really wear them afterward? It wasn't just the inconsistencies, it was their behavior. Amy and Ross seemed too composed, too performative. They moved homes, launched new businesses, posted tributes online, while quietly, suspicion simmered. Years passed, the case went cold, but the truth has a way of surfacing. In 2023, a new detective took on the case with fresh eyes. One detail reignited the investigation: a bloody shoe print in the house, post-mortem, deliberate, and belonging to Ross's exact make and model. The murder weapon? Never found, but the motive? Crystal clear. Amy stood to gain control over the family estate. She allegedly used her role as caregiver to set up the victims, her own family, for slaughter. Ross, with military training and a history of aggression, was the perfect enforcer. Detectives pieced together the timeline. On Halloween night, Amy texted Ross, 10 more minutes LOL, everyone's up and talking. Just after, the killing began. 6 stab wounds to Mike's neck. Kathy tried to reach her revolver. It was found empty beside her body. Every blow was calculated. And then Amy waited, over 24 hours before calling 911. In December 2023, 8 years after the massacre, Amy Ord and Ross Vallard were arrested at their Columbia home. No chase, no protest, just handcuffs. Each was charged with 4 counts of murder. Prosecutors called Amy the mastermind, Ross, the executioner. Given the severity of the crimes and the potential flight risk, bail is denied. And just when it seemed the horror couldn't go deeper, in February 2024, 2 shanks were found in Amy's jail cell. Her chilling response: "I'm getting out of here one way or another." She shared a cell with 2 others. The weapon wasn't found with her belongings. There's no proof it was hers. But for investigators, the case was finally coming full circle. After nearly a decade of silence, deception, and grief, justice had clawed its way back. A family destroyed, a community scarred, and now, finally, a reckoning underway. But while justice had finally stirred from its slumber, the full cost of the crime was only beginning to register. Friends of the victims described the years after the murders as a fog of trauma. Wendy Morris, a childhood friend of Amy Ord, recalled how she couldn't sleep for weeks after the news broke. "I kept picturing Amy laughing, the way she used to in high school, and then remembering she was gone, murdered. It didn't make sense then, it still doesn't now." The Vallard family, once known for their Sunday barbecues and neighborhood generosity, became ghosts in their own town. Ross's mother moved away just 6 months after the funerals, unable to face the street they had all once called home. His father, devastated, spent years pushing for updates from law enforcement. He never stopped asking, why them? Why like this? Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the investigation was far from dormant. It had just gone quiet, strategically so. Detectives assigned to the cold case worked in silence, revisiting evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, reanalyzing every footprint, fingerprint, and fiber. Advances in forensic technology, particularly touch DNA, gave them new tools to work with. What once seemed inconclusive was now a roadmap. And then, finally, a break. A partial DNA match from a relative in a nationwide database opened the door. The suspect, someone no one had expected. He wasn't a drifter or a career criminal. He was a former acquaintance of Ross Vallard. They had crossed paths once in a business deal gone wrong, one that ended with heated words and a financial loss the suspect never forgave. But revenge wasn't the only motive. Inside the suspect's home, investigators uncovered a trove of disturbing material, photos, journals, and surveillance logs suggesting the murders had been premeditated, meticulously planned. This wasn't a moment of passion. It was cold, calculated, cruel. Prosecutors moved fast. With DNA evidence, witness statements, and a chilling written confession, they had their case. But the trial wasn't easy. Defense attorneys argued mental illness, claimed their client had suffered a psychotic break. They tried to paint him as a man broken by life, spiraling into darkness. The jury wasn't convinced. After a 6-week trial, and just 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict was read, guilty. On all counts, sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, the man would never walk free again. Yet even in victory, there was no celebration. Amy's sister, eyes wet with tears, stood outside the courthouse and said, "This isn't closure. There's no such thing, but it's accountability. And we needed that." The town, once gripped by fear and uncertainty, began to breathe again. But the scars remain. Every year, on the anniversary of the murders, friends and neighbors gather at a small memorial near the Ord home. Candles flicker, names are spoken, and silence hangs thick in the air. It's a reminder of what was taken, and what can never be returned. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about murder. It was a story about people, real people, whose lives were shattered by one man's rage, and though justice has been served, the echo of that night still lingers. But while justice had finally stirred from its slumber, the full cost of the crime was only beginning to register. Friends of the victims described the years after the murders as a fog of trauma. Wendy Morris, a childhood friend of Amy Ord, recalled how she couldn't sleep for weeks after the news broke. "I kept picturing Amy laughing, the way she used to in high school, and then remembering she was gone, murdered. It didn't make sense then, it still doesn't now." The Vallard family, once known for their Sunday barbecues and neighborhood generosity, became ghosts in their own town. Ross's mother moved away just 6 months after the funerals, unable to face the street they had all once called home. His father, devastated, spent years pushing for updates from law enforcement. He never stopped asking, why them? Why like this? Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the investigation was far from dormant. It had just gone quiet, strategically so. Detectives assigned to the cold case worked in silence, revisiting evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, reanalyzing every footprint, fingerprint, and fiber. Advances in forensic technology, particularly touch DNA, gave them new tools to work with. What once seemed inconclusive was now a roadmap. And then, finally, a break. A partial DNA match from a relative in a nationwide database opened the door. The suspect, someone no one had expected. He wasn't a drifter or a career criminal. He was a former acquaintance of Ross Vallard. They had crossed paths once in a business deal gone wrong, one that ended with heated words and a financial loss the suspect never forgave. But revenge wasn't the only motive. Inside the suspect's home, investigators uncovered a trove of disturbing material, photos, journals, and surveillance logs suggesting the murders had been premeditated, meticulously planned. This wasn't a moment of passion. It was cold, calculated, cruel. Prosecutors moved fast. With DNA evidence, witness statements, and a chilling written confession, they had their case. But the trial wasn't easy. Defense attorneys argued mental illness, claimed their client had suffered a psychotic break. They tried to paint him as a man broken by life, spiraling into darkness. The jury wasn't convinced. After a 6-week trial, and just 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict was read, guilty. On all counts, sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, the man would never walk free again. Yet even in victory, there was no celebration. Amy's sister, eyes wet with tears, stood outside the courthouse and said, "Every year, on the anniversary of the murders, friends and neighbors gather at a small memorial near the Ord home. Candles flicker, names are spoken, and silence hangs thick in the air. It's a reminder of what was taken, and what can never be returned. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about murder. It was a story about people, real people, whose lives were shattered by one man's rage. And though justice has been served, the echo of that night still lingers. And so, the case of Amy Ord and Ross Vallard ends, not with peace, but with a kind of grim resolution. Justice, delayed for nearly a decade, finally found its way through the shadows. But no conviction can rewind time. No prison sentence can bring back the laughter, the birthdays missed, the moment stolen in the blink of a violent night. In the end, this story isn't just about who did it. It's about the fragility of life, the depth of loss, and the relentless pursuit of truth, even when the trail runs cold. Some stories fade with time. This one never will. Because behind the headlines, the courtrooms, the forensics, there were people. A sister, a son, a friend, a life, gone too soon, but never forgotten. This was a story of darkness, but also of determination, and in that, there's a light that still burns.
Hi, Candace.
Hi, Candace.
Justin, Dylan's dad.
It was supposed to be just another morning in the remote heart of Utah. The sun rose over endless desert brush and distant mountains, casting a golden hue across a landscape where time moves slowly and secrets can stay buried for years. But on May 28, 2022, something was different. 19-year-old Dylan Rounds, a young farmer with a relentless drive and a dream bigger than most, vanished without a trace.
Okay, I know my son, and that's the shortest route to his camp.
If he walked, that road ends right out. If he walked, he would have cut across this field.
But that's as close as cell phone, Pete. Not in Canada, it's out here.
Dylan wasn't your typical teenager. While most kids his age were navigating college or figuring out life in the city, Dylan chose solitude and soil. He was determined to build something with his own hands, a working farm in one of the most isolated corners of the western United States, Lucin, Utah. A ghost town with abandoned tracks, no neighbors, and no streetlights. Just dust, desert, and dreams. His family supported him. His friends admired him. He was known for his work ethic, his optimism, and a grit beyond his years. But one morning, that all changed. Dylan's boots, nearly new, were found about 400 yards from his trailer. They weren't just thrown aside or worn out. They were carefully placed. As strange as it sounds, those boots became the first breadcrumb in a trail of dark and disturbing revelations.
That road ends right out. He walked to it, come from the corner, cut across the field.
But that's because of cell phone, Pete. Not in town, not...
When Dylan stopped answering his phone and failed to check in with his grandmother, alarm bells rang. His truck was still on the property, but Dylan was nowhere in sight. The hours turned into days. Then came the questions. At the center of the growing concern was a man named James Brenner, a 60-year-old loner who lived off the grid and worked odd jobs in the area. Dylan had once offered him a place to stay on the land, believing in second chances even when others didn't. But James had a checkered past, a criminal record, a temper, and a reputation for being unpredictable. Still, without hard evidence, there was no arrest, no closure. Dylan's father, Justin Rounds, took the investigation into his own hands. He began searching the desert. He followed every rumor, knocked on every door.
So if we talk too long,
okay,
I don't care.
Leave your phone still.
It's fine. I'll stay. I can be quiet. I can do that.
That's not the reason.
Yeah,
I'm sorry if you don't.
Lucin is a place where secrets can stretch for miles, where silence often speaks louder than words. As Justin dug deeper, more names started to surface. One of them was Kurt Wadsworth, a local man surrounded by rumors. People whispered about strange behavior, inappropriate relationships, and a connection to Dylan that seemed too close. Then there were inconsistencies. Pants found that were too large to be Dylan's. A trailer that had been visited, yet untouched. People saying Dylan had just walked off. But to Justin, it never made sense. Dylan wouldn't vanish voluntarily. He knew his son. Something terrible had happened. Justin retraced Dylan's steps. He visited the last known locations. GPS data showed the final ping from Dylan's phone had come from a road near a gold mine, remote, barely traveled, and deeply unsettling. Every discovery led to more confusion. A broken fence, a rushed move to shelter equipment from the rain. Locals described Dylan backing up his grain truck hastily, damaging property. There were tracks, truck tires going in and out, but still no Dylan. The desert seemed to swallow everything, evidence, answers, even hope. And then, everything changed. Behind James Brenner's trailer, in a shallow pond, searchers found something small, easy to miss. It was Dylan's cracked phone, the kind of item criminals overlook, the kind of item that tells stories no one can silence. On that phone was a video, just a few seconds long. The quality was poor, the angle awkward. But what it captured changed the course of the investigation. It was James Brenner, standing calmly in front of the lens. Not panicked, not hiding, just cleaning blood-stained weapons with a quiet, practiced motion. His shirt, too, was stained. Law enforcement quickly moved on Brenner's trailer. What they found was damning. Multiple firearms, ammunition, black powder caps, every item needed for the weapon seen in the video. Everything matched. Every piece confirmed what Dylan's family had feared since day one. James Brenner had murdered Dylan Rounds. But one thing remained painfully unresolved. Dylan's body was still missing. Without it, justice felt incomplete. The arrest brought relief, but no peace. 2 long years passed. For Dylan's family, every day without answers was another day in hell. But in early 2024, something shifted. Whether it was guilt, pressure, or both, James Brenner finally led investigators to a location deep in the Utah desert. And there, buried beneath the earth, they found what they had been searching for all along: Dylan Rounds. It was the moment his family had begged for. It brought closure, yes, but it also confirmed the horror they had long suspected. Dylan had died at the hands of someone he once trusted. The story of Dylan Rounds isn't just a mystery about a missing boy. It's a story of trust betrayed, of isolation turned deadly, and of a family who refused to give up. In a ghost town where no one was supposed to hear you scream, one teenager's voice broke through, not with words, but with a video, a pair of boots, and a truth that refused to stay buried. Dylan Rounds wasn't just a victim. He was a young man with a dream, cut down before it could bloom. He believed in work, in land, in building something real. And even in death, he changed the lives of everyone who searched for him, spoke his name, or stood for truth. His story is a warning about trust, about isolation, and about the darkness people hide in the quietest places. But it's also a testament to love, a love so fierce that it refused to let the desert win. The case of Dylan Rounds wasn't cracked by a detective or a brilliant clue. It was cracked by a father who refused to give up, by a mother who demanded the world pay attention, and by a phone, damaged, sunken, but not silent. In the end, justice came not because the system worked, but because a family wouldn't let it rest. And the desert? The desert may take many things, but not the truth. If this story moved you, if Dylan's fight for justice deserves to be remembered, don't let it fade into silence. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that matter, and share this video to keep Dylan's legacy alive. What do you think really happened that night? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
All right.
Fine. No one in here at the moment. The police! Got it. Stay where you are. Stay where you are!
Suspicion of murder against Jonathan Collett and who else in Collett.
Yeah, that's what he's in.
Right, okay.
Yep, okay. Obviously I'll
Where about your mum?
a little bit more complicated.
The quiet town of Chelmsford, Essex basked in the golden light of an unremarkable September afternoon when the first official cracks appeared in Virginia McCullough's carefully constructed lies. For months, the 32-year-old had maintained the illusion that her elderly parents were merely away on extended holiday, a fiction she supported with disturbingly calm assurances to neighbors and increasingly erratic behavior that included her bizarre fake pregnancy, a shifting prosthetic belly she adjusted in supermarket aisles while casually discussing due dates. Behind the McCullough's lace curtains, however, a nightmare was unfolding. When Essex police officers pushed past Virginia's protests for a welfare check, they were met with a stench so visceral it made one veteran constable gag, the unmistakable odor of human decomposition that no amount of air freshener could mask. What began as routine procedure rapidly escalated into one of Britain's most disturbing domestic homicide cases as detectives discovered 70-year-old John McCullough's partially mummified remains beneath a moldering blanket fort in the living room, his diabetic body showing signs of deliberate insulin deprivation. Upstairs, officers recalled upon finding 71-year-old Lois McCullough's skeletal frame stuffed inside a bedroom wardrobe, her nightgown fused to parchment-like skin after months of confinement in the airless space. Most chilling of all was Virginia's demeanor, alternately giggling at inappropriate moments and offering disturbingly matter-of-fact explanations about how she'd helped them along when her parents became too much work, her eyes devoid of any recognizable human remorse. Forensic analysis would later reveal John had languished for weeks in his own waste before dying, while Lois's fingernail grooves in the wardrobe door testified to a frantic, starving struggle no one heard. The crime scene spoke of prolonged torture rather than impulsive violence, empty pill bottles carefully arranged on a dresser, soiled adult diapers stacked with bizarre precision, and, most puzzling, a fully set dining table with 3 places, as if Virginia had been taking meals with corpses. Neighbors' retrospective accounts painted an even more disturbing picture of the months preceding discovery, Virginia hosting a surreal baby shower while decomposition fluid seeped through the ceiling below, her daily routines continuing uninterrupted as she tended the garden just feet from where her father's body lay rotting. Financial records showed she'd siphoned £85,000 from her parents' accounts, spending lavishly on designer clothes and the very pregnancy prosthetics that had briefly made her the center of sympathetic attention. As investigators peeled back layer after layer of deception, a terrifying profile emerged, not of a mentally ill woman overwhelmed by caregiving, but of a calculating predator who'd turned the family home into a private torture chamber where she played both jailer and executioner to the people who'd given her life. The McCullough case exploded into national infamy when forensic psychologists revealed Virginia had kept detailed journals documenting her parents' decline, not as remorseful chronicles, but as clinical observations that read like lab notes. Day 17, father's breathing more irregular, mother refusing meals, will increase sedatives, read one typical entry, its dispassionate tone mirroring Virginia's flat affect during police interviews. Prosecutors built an airtight case showing how she'd systematically isolated John and Lois years before their deaths, intercepting mail, disabling their phone, and turning away visitors with increasingly elaborate excuses. She didn't snap, she conducted a symphony of abuse, remarked Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Hargreaves, pointing to evidence that Virginia had practiced withholding medication during previous illnesses she induced in her parents. The fake pregnancy emerged as perhaps her most grotesque manipulation, a months-long performance involving purchased ultrasound images, fabricated doctor's appointments, and even a gender reveal party where Virginia teared up while cutting into a pink cake, all while her mother's body decomposed upstairs. Crime scene photos presented at trial showed the surreal juxtaposition of Virginia's pristine bedroom, makeup neatly organized, romance novels stacked by color, against the squalid horror just down the hall where maggots writhed in her father's eye sockets. Former classmates came forward with disturbing anecdotes about her childhood fascination with control, recalling how she'd once trapped a cat in a dollhouse for days to see what would happen. The prosecution's psychological expert testified that Virginia exhibited textbook malignant narcissism with sadistic tendencies, citing her enjoyment of making her dementia-addled mother beg for food she'd then withhold. Most damning were the financial trails. Virginia had not only drained her parents' life savings but taken out reverse mortgages on their home, all while collecting their pensions for 8 months post-mortem via forged signatures. The trial took a surreal turn when Virginia fired her defense team and attempted to represent herself, delivering a rambling closing argument that veered between claiming her parents had asked for release and accusing neighbors of framing her. Her complete lack of remorse reached its zenith when she casually corrected the coroner about the timeline of Lois's death. "No, it was Tuesday, not Wednesday. I remember because EastEnders was on," a statement so chilling the courtroom fell utterly silent. The jury took just 3 hours to convict on all counts, with the judge sentencing her to life with a minimum of 25 years, calling the crimes a masterclass in cruelty that redefines filial betrayal. Yet Virginia's most disturbing legacy might be the unanswered questions she left behind. How many of her parents' earlier illnesses had she engineered? Were there other victims during her years working as a caregiver? And most unsettling, had she always been this monstrous, or did the domestic prison she created for her parents somehow forge the monster in the process? 5 years after Virginia McCullough's conviction, the house at 23 Oakwood Drive stands as a grotesque tourist attraction, its boarded windows and condemned notices doing little to deter true crime pilgrims who leave rotting flowers on the doorstep. The current owner, a property developer who purchased it at auction, tells reporters the structure will be demolished after forensic cleaners refuse to enter, citing residual biohazards and something more intangible one technician described as a wrongness in the air. Chelmsford remains permanently altered by the case. Local pharmacies now flag unusual requests for diabetic supplies, while social workers conduct surprise visits to elderly residents who miss appointments. Virginia's sisters have become anti-elder abuse activists, their grief compounded by prison letters where their sibling blithely discusses yoga classes and book club selections without ever acknowledging her crimes. Inside HMP Bronzefield's psychiatric wing, Virginia has become something of a macabre celebrity among inmates, reportedly running a thriving black market business forging legal documents, a twisted echo of the paperwork she falsified to steal her parents' pensions. Psychiatrists monitoring her note she's developed a new fixation on fertility treatments, submitting monthly requests for IVF despite being barred from contact with children. Meanwhile, internet conspiracy theorists have latched onto the case's ambiguities, spinning elaborate tales about secret satanic rituals or government mind control experiments, nonsense that nevertheless thrives in the absence of satisfying explanations for such profound evil. Forensic anthropologists recently made headlines by identifying previously unnoticed bite marks on John McCullough's remains, suggesting Virginia may have engaged in even more extreme behaviors than originally documented. The case's cultural impact endures through a controversial West End play that imagines Lois's final days, while TikTok trends see teens daring each other to touch the McCullough's former mailbox. Perhaps most telling is how the British legal system has changed because of Virginia. New duty to report laws mandate that pharmacists alert authorities when vulnerable patients miss medication pickups, while banks now require in-person verification for pensioners changing account permissions. Yet for all these reforms, the fundamental horror remains. If Virginia McCullough wasn't some obvious monster, but the woman who brought scones to neighborhood potlucks, the devoted daughter strangers praised for her patience with aging parents. In this sense, her true legacy may be the end of innocence for communities like Chelmsford, where drawn curtains now inspire unease rather than respect for privacy, and where every cheerful caregiver is viewed with subconscious suspicion. As one neighbor summarized while watching the wrecking ball finally approach the infamous house, "We'll tear it down, but that darkness, it doesn't just vanish. It finds new cracks to hide in." The McCullough case endures as a grim reminder that the most terrifying evils aren't supernatural, but horrifyingly human, the kind that smile at you over the garden fence while unimaginable horrors fester just behind the door. If this story unsettled you, if it made you look twice at your own neighborhood, then let's keep that conversation going. Hit like, subscribe for more true crime stories that stay with you, and share this video to help others understand what lurks in the spaces we think are safe.
One of our detectives coming over. Who knows where she's
Nobody's
at?
filed a missing persons complaint, no one's filed a missing person.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of phones back there. I called her phone and it was ringing. What if they have her phone? And they're just taking an answer of coming from a...
She's supposed to be kind of hard to get around, so it's not like the one lady said she kind of never leaves really here. She's just in this area, so...
In a small, seemingly peaceful town like Sylvania Township, the last thing anyone expected was a story so dark, so tragic, and so senseless that it would haunt the community for years to come. Nestled quietly in Ohio, Sylvania was the kind of town where neighbors still waved at each other from their porches, where people left their doors unlocked at night, and where crime was something people watched on TV, never something they imagined would touch their own lives. That's what made what happened all the more shocking. Nicole Jones was a name known to many in her neighborhood, not because she sought attention, but because of how generously she gave it to others.
Is who the kid is.
Okay.
And he's 33.
Yes.
Had you ever seen her here?
No.
All right. So that's the girl that the 17-year-old that he's with.
Okay. Who's the older gentleman then?
That's him.
That's the
This is the target. This is the guy that's wanted by Wood County.
Okay.
She was a woman who had been through her share of storms in life, yet never let them define her. A single mother of 2 children, she worked tirelessly to provide for Caitlin and Jonathan, ensuring they always had a warm meal, a safe home, and above all, a mother who loved them beyond measure. To those who knew her, Nicole was selfless to a fault. She was the type of person who would give you the coat off her back without hesitation. Whether it was helping a struggling neighbor, volunteering for school events, or simply being the friend who always answered the phone at 2 a.m., Nicole was dependable, loyal, and full of empathy. Life hadn't been easy for her, far from it. But instead of growing bitter, she became a source of strength for those around her. Nicole's love for her children was unwavering. Caitlin, a bright and thoughtful teenager, shared her mother's kindness, while young Jonathan, full of energy and curiosity, adored his mother with that innocent, unshakable bond only young children possess. Together, the 3 of them had built a life rooted in love, resilience, and quiet perseverance. But love can be blinding. And in Nicole's case, her compassion, her desire to help others, even at her own expense, would be tragically exploited. Unbeknownst to many, Nicole had recently extended her hand to help someone from her past. it wasn't the first time. She believed in second chances, believed that people could change, and that sometimes all someone needed was a little support to turn their life around. She had opened her home before, offered a spare room to friends or distant relatives down on their luck. Her door was always open, and she trusted that kindness would be returned with respect.
I was afraid to knock her over and started doing it, and then I took the rock that I had, right off the floor, and I started dropping it over her head.
Is that what the scratches are on your arm? I don't know what these are. No, remember, like, if you lift up your sleeve, the other one, are they from her?
No.
No?
Oh, these are so-called ones.
Okay, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did she fight it up? Yeah.
What?
Did she fight it up?
She was very in shock, so she didn't fight. Like going there and remember the hackling the blood club in her mouth there.
But this time would be different. This time, the person she let in was carrying secrets. Dark ones. And once inside the safety of her home, that darkness began to grow. Slowly at first, quiet tension, unspoken discomfort, but it wouldn't stay hidden for long. The very act of generosity that had defined Nicole for so many years would become the key that unlocked a chain of events leading to unimaginable tragedy. No one could have seen it coming. Not her friends. Not her children. Not even Nicole herself.
No, we're over here. Very first one coming in.
Oh, yeah, she has dementia really bad.
Who?
Okay, so if you're talking...
No, it's the very first one coming in. No, it's not. It's the very first one on the left when you come in.
Okay, all right. So... Oh, that one.
Yes.
We don't have keys, but I have not seen her in forever.
Okay.
We might have to walk into this, is what I'm saying.
Okay. This one on this corner right
Nope,
here?
it's definitely 7456. Yeah. We got 2 U.S. Marshals there. It involves a case out of Canton. So we're trying to check the safety of her. Has anybody seen her?
No. I've only seen a guy going in and out of there. Okay,
so would we have anything listed with the manager of people to contact for an emergency?
Well, I have all her phone numbers of people that live there, but it's her phone number.
Okay, but there's nothing listed when she moved in, like an emergency, contact this person, nothing like that?
No.
So the only way we're going to get in is knocking the door down?
Yeah, now I will tell you the police had to come to a house over there next to mine, and they went through the sunroom.
The sunroom is open, but the door leading into the main place is locked.
Yeah. I don't know what to tell you other than, I mean, I can get a phone number for the people that live there.
Maybe there's a gentleman's number?
There could be.
Okay, if you could.
I live around the corner, so let me go get it.
Okay.
I don't want to lock myself out.
And do you think this one person you've never seen, does her neighbor know her?
I've seen her. I have not seen her in a long time. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
Nicole was gone. The house was oddly clean. Too clean. Her son was missing. Her car, too. And Caitlin...
And by the time the town of Sylvania realized what was happening behind the walls of Nicole's modest home, it would already be too late. Because sometimes, the people we trust the most, are the ones we should fear. No one could have imagined how quickly things would unravel. Nicole's life came to an end in the most horrific way possible, at the hands of those she loved and trusted most. It was a betrayal so profound that even the seasoned detectives assigned to the case were left shaken. Caitlin, her own 17-year-old daughter, was the one who ultimately ended Nicole's life. But this wasn't just the story of a daughter turning on her mother in a single, tragic moment. It was the result of something far more sinister, a twisted web of manipulation, influence, and emotional decay that had been building for weeks, maybe even months. The warning signs had been there, though subtle. Caitlin had started withdrawing from her usual routines. Her once warm demeanor had become distant, guarded. Nicole had confided in a close friend that her daughter had been acting strangely, spending more time with a new group of people, pushing boundaries, becoming defiant. Nicole wasn't overly alarmed, she chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion. But beneath the surface, something much darker was brewing. When Nicole first went missing, the community was puzzled. There were no obvious signs of foul play. Her car was still in the driveway. Her purse and phone were in the house. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. A missing person report was filed, but there was no immediate panic. Nicole had always been reliable, but people go off the grid sometimes, right? Maybe she needed a break. Maybe she just needed space. Days passed, and whispers began to spread. Concern turned into suspicion. What was once thought to be a brief disappearance quickly became something far more alarming. Detectives began canvassing the area, speaking with friends, neighbors, and family members. It didn't take long for them to circle back to Caitlin. At first glance, she played the part of the worried daughter well, tears in her eyes, clutching photos of her mother, begging for answers. But there was something off. Caitlin's concern seemed rehearsed. Her grief felt calculated. Then came the inconsistencies. She told friends different stories about the last time she saw her mother. Her timeline kept shifting. One day she claimed Nicole had left to visit a friend. Another day, she said they had an argument and Nicole stormed out. When detectives began pressing her for details, Caitlin grew defensive. She fixated on bizarre theories, mumbling something about the dark web, insisting her mother had enemies online, that this was all some massive conspiracy no one else could understand. She was a nice mom, Caitlin told investigators during one of her early interviews, eyes red-rimmed but dry. She didn't deserve this. The words were flat. Mechanical. And behind them, detectives could sense the faintest flicker of something far more chilling, guilt. Her answers didn't add up. The excuses were desperate, almost panicked. It was clear she was stalling. But for what? As investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover the layers of deceit and manipulation that had been hiding in plain sight. Text messages were recovered, search histories were analyzed, and slowly, a new picture of Caitlin emerged, one that was unrecognizable from the sweet, smiling teenager in family photos. A girl who had been influenced, radicalized, and emboldened by people Nicole had once allowed into her home. The tragedy of Nicole's death wasn't just that it happened, it was how it happened. It was the quiet breakdown of trust between a mother and her daughter. It was the manipulation that crept into a vulnerable household. And it was the unbearable truth that sometimes, the threat isn't a stranger at the door. It's someone already sitting at the kitchen table. And the most horrifying part? The story was only beginning to unfold. The more detectives pressed Caitlin, the more her fragile story began to crack open. At first, she clung to the narrative of being framed. She insisted that someone had hacked into her accounts, someone trying to make her look guilty. But it didn't take long for those flimsy defenses to crumble under the weight of the mounting evidence. Investigators had already begun reconstructing the timeline of Nicole's disappearance, and what they found was both damning and disturbing. Forensics revealed blood stains in areas of the home that had clearly been cleaned in a hurry, poorly, sloppily. GPS data pulled from Caitlin's phone didn't support her alibis. In fact, it placed her at home during the window when Nicole was last seen. Even more incriminating were the digital footprints. Search histories detailing how to dispose of a body, how to delete location data, and even how long it takes for someone to die from strangulation. But the final blow came from others involved, fragments of conversations, text messages, and a few brave confessions that painted a chilling portrait of Caitlin's descent. She had not acted alone in planning. She had confided in others. And some of those people, whether out of fear or guilt, began cooperating with law enforcement. Faced with the undeniable truth, Caitlin's demeanor began to shift. Gone was the trembling, teary teenager who claimed to be confused and frightened. In her place was someone hollowed out, blank, distant, like a shadow of herself. As the truth cornered her, Caitlin finally broke. There was no outburst, no tears. Just a cold, flat recounting of the murder. She confessed in chilling detail how she had taken her mother's life. And it wasn't a sudden act of rage. It wasn't the heat of the moment. It was planned. Methodical. Intentional. Jonathan couldn't do it. Despite whatever pressure he was under, despite whatever dark forces had been influencing Caitlin, he couldn't bring himself to harm Nicole. It was a heartbreaking glimpse of innocence holding out in a house already drowning in corruption and chaos. That's when Caitlin decided to take matters into her own hands. She waited for her moment. When Nicole let her guard down, still believing her daughter was just going through a difficult phase, Caitlin struck. She described how she wrapped her hands around her mother's neck and squeezed until Nicole stopped breathing. But she didn't stop there. Once Nicole was unconscious, Caitlin began slamming her mother's head repeatedly against the hard floor. Over and over again. With force. With finality. And the way she described it was what unsettled everyone in the room the most. There was no trembling voice. No remorseful reflection. She spoke about the murder like it was a task she had finally completed. As though she had taken out the trash or finished a homework assignment. It was in that cold, detached tone that detectives truly understood the depth of Caitlin's disconnection from reality. This wasn't just a murder. It was a psychological collapse. A deeply disturbed descent into something almost unrecognizable, something that had festered and grown in the corners of a home once filled with love. And Nicole, the woman who gave everything for her children, had no idea just how dark things had become. After the killing, Caitlin didn't show remorse, she showed resolve. The same hands that had once clung to Nicole for comfort now methodically worked to erase her from existence. It was a chilling transformation. Alongside her younger brother, Jonathan, Caitlin began the cold, calculated task of cleaning up the scene. The two teenagers scoured the house for any trace of blood, fingerprints, or evidence that could point to the horror that had just occurred within those walls. They used bleach, wipes, and anything they could find under the kitchen sink, working in silence, in sync, as if the murder had been just another part of their routine. The most disturbing detail wasn't just the act itself, it was what came next. After cleaning, they dragged Nicole's lifeless body to the car, placing it in the trunk like luggage, like something burdensome to be gotten rid of. They then drove around for hours, even stopping for food at a local McDonald's. Surveillance footage would later show them calmly ordering meals, as if nothing was amiss, just two kids out for a late-night drive. But in the back of that vehicle, their mother's body lay still, discarded like an afterthought. Eventually, they found a dumpster behind an industrial lot and dumped Nicole's body inside. No ceremony. No final words. No hesitation. Just garbage bags and silence. Throughout her confession, Caitlin remained chillingly composed. She described each step of the murder and cleanup with a calm detachment. There was no trembling in her voice, no hint of regret. When asked about Jonathan, she admitted that he had trouble processing what had happened. But her concern wasn't for him, it was for the execution of the plan. She noted how he had hesitated, how his discomfort was more about losing the structure of his life than the woman who gave him that life. Jonathan's interview with detectives played out in a far different tone. At first, he tried to mirror his sister's early defense. He claimed ignorance, saying Nicole had just vanished. His answers were short, vague, and rehearsed. But when investigators revealed Caitlin had already confessed, down to every last horrifying detail, Jonathan cracked. His voice shook. His composure collapsed. In a quiet, broken tone, he admitted the truth: he hadn't killed his mother, but he had helped clean up. He had helped carry her body. He had helped dispose of her. And yes, they had gone to McDonald's. Yes, they had driven around. And yes, he had lied. Jonathan's confession painted a portrait of a boy trapped between fear, confusion, and a loyalty warped by manipulation. He wasn't the killer, but he wasn't innocent. And in the eyes of the law, complicity in a crime so brutal would come with a heavy price. As the investigation continued, something even more disturbing began to emerge. Caitlin's mind was a maze of fiction, fantasy, and deep-rooted delusion. In a final, bizarre twist, she confessed to killing someone else. She claimed that months earlier, she had been involved in a drive-by shooting in Arizona. A completely unrelated murder. One with no evidence, no victim, no record. Just Caitlin's word. Authorities were stunned. They investigated, combed through Arizona records, interviewed local law enforcement, but found nothing, no leads, no bodies, no witnesses. Just another lie in a growing list of fabrications. Whether it was a cry for attention, a calculated manipulation, or the symptom of deeper psychological unraveling, no one could be sure. What was clear, however, was that Caitlin was capable of creating entire narratives, and believing in them, right up until the moment they fell apart. A teenager who had once lived under the roof of love and stability had morphed into someone capable of the unthinkable. And now, the justice system had to decide what came next. Nicole's body was never found, and that fact alone haunted everyone who loved her. The absence of a proper burial, of final goodbyes, left a raw wound that could never fully close. For her family, friends, and neighbors, the grief wasn't just about losing Nicole, it was about losing her in the most unthinkable way, without closure, without answers, and without justice that felt complete. As the days turned into weeks, the search for Nicole's remains continued, but each fruitless effort only added to the heartbreak. It was as if Caitlin and Jonathan had erased her from existence, her voice silenced, her presence wiped away, her body discarded like she never mattered. And yet, she had mattered. Deeply. The emotional toll on Nicole's loved ones was compounded by the horror of the facts that came to light. Her murder wasn't random. It wasn't the act of a stranger or an intruder. It was calculated. Planned. Carried out by the very people she had spent her life protecting. Even more disturbing was the suggestion that Nicole's murder wasn't just rooted in teen rebellion or mental health issues, it was connected to something far more sinister. Investigators uncovered a web of manipulation and obsession that hinted at a twisted love triangle, one that revolved around Caitlin and a female classmate. Text messages recovered from Caitlin's phone painted a disturbing picture of emotional dependency, jealousy, and growing hatred toward Nicole. In Caitlin's mind, Nicole was the enemy. The obstacle. The one person standing in the way of her toxic relationship. And so, Nicole had to be removed, not argued with, not avoided, but eliminated. Caitlin's obsession had turned lethal. It was a narrative almost too dark to believe. A teenager so consumed by her own fantasies and rage that she murdered her own mother just to maintain control over a crumbling, codependent relationship. It was a case that shocked the most hardened detectives. Not because of the violence, they had seen violence before, but because of the betrayal. Nicole Jones was not just a mother. She was a provider, a listener, a constant presence in her children's lives. She wasn't perfect, no one is, but she was patient. She was forgiving. She had done everything she could to give Caitlin and Jonathan a better life, even when it came at the expense of her own happiness. And that, in the end, was the tragic irony. Nicole's generosity, her boundless love, was the very thing that made her vulnerable. As the community reeled from the details of the case, frustration with the justice system grew. Nicole had been missing for days before law enforcement took real action. Her family, already drowning in grief, publicly criticized the delayed response. If she had been found sooner, maybe we'd have something to bury, her sister tearfully told reporters. Maybe we wouldn't be left with nightmares instead of memories. Neighbors described Nicole as warm, helpful, and selfless, a woman who never hesitated to lend a hand, who showed up for school events, community meetings, and charity drives. The same people now stood in front of news cameras, holding vigils and lighting candles in her memory, unable to wrap their minds around how such a person could meet such a brutal end. There was no playbook for this kind of grief. How could a mother's love turn into a death sentence? One neighbor asked aloud during a candlelight vigil. No one had an answer. Because in the story of Nicole Jones, there were no satisfying conclusions. Only pain. Only betrayal. And only the hope that the truth, though devastating, might one day lead to healing. In the courtroom, the trial of Caitlin and Jonathan Jones quickly evolved from a criminal proceeding into a full-blown media circus. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. News anchors analyzed every twist and turn. True crime enthusiasts flooded online forums, trading theories, dissecting every word of the confessions, and asking the same haunting question: how could two children do this to their own mother? Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense, emotionally charged, and at times, surreal. The prosecution painted Caitlin as a cold, calculating killer, someone who, despite being just 17, had the manipulative mind of someone far older. They described how she had orchestrated the murder over several days, tested the boundaries of her brother's loyalty, and eventually executed the crime herself when Jonathan couldn't go through with it. The courtroom heard Caitlin's confession, monotone, almost emotionless, where she described strangling Nicole and smashing her head against the ground. Her voice never cracked. Her eyes didn't flinch. Jurors sat frozen. Some members of the public gallery wiped away tears. Others turned their heads in disbelief. Caitlin's complete detachment from the horror of her actions left many shaken to their core. Despite her age, the court agreed to try Caitlin as an adult. The nature of the crime was simply too savage, too deliberate. She faced charges of aggravated murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse, each one carrying heavy sentencing guidelines. Jonathan, though not the one who carried out the murder, was painted as a willing accomplice. He helped clean. He helped move the body. He knew what Caitlin had done, and he said nothing. His defense team argued that he had been manipulated by his sister, that he had been emotionally coerced. But the prosecution presented texts and witness statements showing that Jonathan wasn't just a passive participant. He had opportunities to come forward and stop the murder, and chose silence. At first, both Caitlin and Jonathan pleaded not guilty. Caitlin's defense tried to shift the narrative. They claimed she had been emotionally abused, not by Nicole, but by a romantic partner who had encouraged violent fantasies. They hinted at mental illness, emotional trauma, and a desperate need for escape. But the mountain of evidence, GPS data, chilling text messages between the siblings, recorded confessions, the trail of blood, and the surveillance footage from the McDonald's visit, left no doubt in anyone's mind. Eventually, perhaps sensing that a trial would only end with a harsher sentence, Caitlin changed her plea to no contest. Jonathan followed suit. The court accepted the pleas. Caitlin and Jonathan Jones were each sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. A sentence that, while severe, left open the possibility that they could one day rejoin society. For the prosecution, it was a victory. For the defense, it was mercy. For the public, it was justice served. But for Nicole's family, it was simply not enough. They sat quietly as the sentences were read, holding hands, exchanging tearful glances. There was no celebration. No sense of peace. Just a quiet, aching void that echoed in every corner of the courtroom. Nicole's sister later spoke to the media, her voice cracking. They might get out in 25 years. Nicole doesn't. Nicole doesn't get a second chance. The courtroom emptied, but the weight of the trial lingered. It wasn't just about the verdict. It was about what the community had lost. A mother. A friend. A light extinguished by those she loved the most. And while the legal chapter had closed, the emotional toll was just beginning to settle in. The case of Caitlin Coons and Jonathan Jones raised difficult questions, questions that claw at the very core of what it means to love, trust, and protect the ones closest to us. What happens when a child, someone born from your body, someone you've raised, nurtured, and cherished, becomes the architect of your destruction? How do we as a society grapple with that level of betrayal? Is it possible to find justice in a situation so twisted and heartbreaking? And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, can evil truly exist within those we love? Caitlin's age sparked heated debates across media outlets and dinner tables alike. She was 17, legally a minor, but emotionally hardened beyond her years. Her actions weren't born in a moment of passion or fear. They were calculated, planned, methodical. She gave her brother 5 hours to carry out the killing. When he couldn't do it, she did it herself. There was no panic. No hesitation. Just grim determination. So should she have been treated like a child or like the adult her crime demanded she be? And then there's Jonathan. Not the murderer, but far from innocent. His silence, his willingness to help hide what had been done, made him an accomplice in every sense of the word. He helped clean up the scene. He helped move the body. He went to McDonald's afterward. Could he have stopped it? Could he have saved his mother if he had spoken up just once? These questions have no easy answers, and perhaps they never will. What we do know is that Nicole Jones was not just a victim. She was a mother, a sister, a friend, a woman who opened her heart and home, even when it put her at risk. She was kind, resilient, and selfless to a fault. Her only mistake, if it could even be called that, was loving her children unconditionally, believing in their goodness even when that belief became her undoing. Nicole's death wasn't the result of a random act of violence. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong or the outcome of a heated domestic dispute. It was something much darker, a betrayal so personal, so intimate, that it defies comprehension. It was the people she loved most who turned on her. The very people she worked herself to the bone to protect and provide for. And in the end, her love was not just unreciprocated, it was used against her. To this day, Nicole's remains have never been recovered. That absence, of closure, of answers, of a proper place to grieve, has left a permanent scar on those she left behind. Her family continues to search, emotionally if not physically, for the final piece of her story. They attend court hearings. They speak her name. They keep her memory alive, hoping one day someone will come forward with the truth, with the location, with something, anything, that can bring her home. In the years since the case broke, Sylvania Township has tried to move on, but the shadow of what happened there lingers. Friends and neighbors who once believed they lived in a safe, peaceful town now lock their doors with a little more urgency. Parents look at their children and wonder, could it ever happen here? The story of Nicole Jones is not just another true crime tale to be dissected in podcasts or turned into documentaries. It's a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes, it grows silently inside the walls of our homes. Sometimes, it wears the face of someone we tuck into bed at night. This wasn't a murder by strangers. This was love weaponized. This was trust obliterated. This was a family destroyed from the inside out. And for those who remain, Nicole's grieving loved ones, the investigators haunted by her absence, the community forever changed, this story will never be over. Not until Nicole is found. Not until justice feels complete. Not until peace returns to the memory of a woman who gave everything, and lost her life to those who should have loved her the most. If you want to hear more stories like this one, stories that dive deep into the darkest corners of the human soul, be sure to subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell. The truth can be a lot more chilling than we ever expect.
Find her because, like, everybody's concerned because they haven't talked to her. We're more concerned about, your daughter. Your daughter. How old's your daughter? She's 1 year old. They came out. They said no car was in the driveway. No car was here. She's a mother of a 1 year old. She always shows up at work. She always contacts us. We haven't heard from her. This is really, really bad. We have a bad feeling.
Saw them this morning prior to Christine Holloway going to work.
I was concerned because it wasn't like her. She was always consistent, always on time or before time. And so I was just hoping nothing had happened.
They were looking for her, everyone was. Concern turned to panic when Christine Holloway stopped answering her phone. Friends and family were used to hearing from her. But now?
That when he went inside the home, he noticed windows that were open despite it being cold and snowing. And also, all of the sheets and bedding were gone from the bed and the crib.
Nothing. She hadn't shown up to work. She hadn't called. And even more alarming, her 1-year-old daughter, Vanessa, was also missing. She never missed work, a close friend said. Always checked in. Always on time or early. And she never went anywhere without Vanessa. It was a cold Monday in early December 2019, but the chill wasn't just in the air, it crept through the silence like a warning. At 612 Myrtle Avenue in Ansonia, Connecticut, Christine's apartment stood still.
Please front it. Oh shit, fuck, holy shit. Get the EV here. Holy fuck. Okay. Try back up. No, clear the room. Clear the house.
Today, the identity of the female victim found inside 6.5 Myrtle Avenue on Monday, December 2nd, 2019, was positively identified as Christine Marie Holloway, age 43, the mother of Vanessa Morales, our missing 1-year-old baby. Vanessa Morales is still missing, and we, along with the FBI, Derby Police, Connecticut State Police, are still following leads to locate Vanessa to return home safely.
Christine lived in a modest apartment above a detached garage. When officers arrived, they immediately noticed something off. Her new black Ford Focus was parked in the driveway. A car Jose had helped her buy just a week earlier.
Still. Officers arrived around 1 p.m. for a welfare check. There was no car in the driveway. No lights turned off. Just a locked door and no answer. They knocked, once, twice. Nothing. From the outside, something was already wrong. A bay window was wide open despite the freezing weather. Snow flurries swirled into the apartment through that crack. Another officer noticed the bathroom skylight was broken. Inside, the lights were on, but no sounds of life. No crying. No footsteps. Just stillness. Then came the decision to force entry.
Today, she said that she talked to you today, and that you said you saw her leave this morning. I saw her leave early in the morning to go to work. That's about it. Who was she with when she left?
We're going to make entry. Be advised, accurate warning complete. The moment they stepped inside, it was clear, something terrible had happened. The apartment had the eerie stillness of a life interrupted. A single pink baby shoe on the floor. Toys arranged as if playtime had only just ended. A half-eaten plate of food left behind in a hurry. Then they opened the bathroom door. Oh, dude. Holy, Get in there. Clear the house, now. Inside the bathtub lay the lifeless body of 43-year-old Christine Holloway. She was naked, bruised, bloodied, beaten so viciously it looked personal. Her body told the story of unimaginable violence. But even worse, her daughter, Vanessa, was nowhere to be found. Bed sheets were missing. From the bed and even from the crib. The apartment had been wiped of clues, and the only thing more chilling than the scene inside, was the gaping mystery of what happened to baby Vanessa. Today, the female found inside 612 and 1/2 Myrtle Avenue has been officially identified as Christine Marie Holloway, mother of missing 1-year-old Vanessa Morales. Christine was dead. And Vanessa had vanished without a trace. The FBI, Connecticut State Police, Derby Police, all launched into action. A search had begun. A clock had started ticking. And for every second that passed without answers, the fear only grew stronger. What started as a routine welfare check had become something far darker, a murder investigation and a desperate manhunt. A mother was dead. A baby was missing. Vanessa Morales had just turned 2. Her crib was empty. Her clothes, gone. And every day that passed without a trace only deepened the agony for Christine Holloway's family. "It still doesn't feel real," one relative said through tears. "We just keep praying Vanessa comes home."
So we didn't know the baby. So they're come over and stay over our house and holiday and things like that for celebrating.
So you do all that for Vanessa?
Yeah, it's for
It's not for Christine.
It's not for Christine, it's for Vanessa. Yes, I do.
Police had no time to waste. The investigation turned its full attention toward the last person known to see Christine alive, her boyfriend and Vanessa's father, Jose Morales. He initially told Christine's family that he'd seen her the morning she vanished, said she was leaving for work with Vanessa in her arms. But when detectives questioned him, his story began to shift. "I leave early for work," he said. "I didn't actually see her. I just talked to her on the phone." Pressed further, he changed his answer again. "Last time I saw her? Friday." Inconsistencies piled up fast. Surveillance footage showed Jose near Christine's apartment the day she died, after she was already dead. Neighbors confirmed seeing him leave. And when police searched the apartment, they found bruises on Jose's hands. Faint scratches. A swollen cheek. All signs of a struggle. He didn't ask about Vanessa. Didn't seem worried. Instead, he complained about the back seat of the police cruiser. And then there was the 911 call. Placed at 2 a.m. on Saturday, December 1st, before Christine was reported missing, a man called from a phone registered to Jose. He was slurring, mumbling about Myrtle Avenue. A woman's voice jumped in. "Stop. Hang up. Who are you calling?" The line disconnected before an address could be given. Police drove by the area that night, but saw nothing suspicious. No one knew that a murder had already taken place. Then, days later, a chilling discovery: a donation bin near a church overflowed with bags of baby clothes. Soaked in blood. Christine's mail mixed in. Toys. Stuffed animals. And a second pink baby shoe, the match to the one found near the crib. The evidence was building. Surveillance footage. DNA. Timeline inconsistencies. But still, no sign of Vanessa. Jose Morales claimed innocence. He said 2 strangers broke in, killed Christine, and kidnapped his daughter while he was unconscious, after using PCP. Then, his story changed again. And again. None of it matched the evidence. Not the video. Not the phone records. Not the trail of discarded baby items, or beer cans left behind. Christine Holloway's murder was brutal, personal, and deliberate. And it would eventually see justice. But her baby girl, 14-month-old Vanessa, had vanished into thin air. And the only person who might know where she is, isn't talking. Christine Holloway was more than a name in a headline. She was a beloved daughter, a dedicated teacher, and above all, a devoted mother. Her world changed in late 2018 with the birth of Vanessa Morales. She poured every ounce of herself into motherhood. Every photo, every conversation, every future plan, centered around her baby girl. That's why her sudden silence on that cold Monday morning in December was so alarming. Christine never missed work without a reason. Never ignored texts. Never left Vanessa. Rosie Clark, the daycare owner and Christine's employer, made the first call. When no one in Christine's family. The address, 612 Myrtle Avenue. What followed was a discovery that would shatter a family and launch a national search. "We're going to attempt to make entry, please follow me, clear the house." Inside, police found 43-year-old Christine Marie Holloway beaten to death in her own bathtub. Her 1-year-old daughter, Vanessa Morales, was gone. Christine Holloway was positively identified on Monday, December 2, 2019. The mother of missing 1-year-old Vanessa Morales. Despite tireless efforts by the FBI, Connecticut State Police, and local law enforcement, Vanessa has never been found. Leads are still being pursued. Tips still come in. But to this day, Vanessa's fate remains a haunting mystery. When officers arrived at Christine Holloway's apartment, something immediately felt wrong. Her new black Ford Focus, a car Jose Morales had helped her buy just a week earlier, was parked in the driveway. But the bay window was wide open, despite the bitter cold. The bathroom skylight was cracked. Lights were on. But no one answered the door. Police knocked. Once. Twice. Nothing. The apartment was sealed from the inside. No movement. No sound. With growing concern, they made the call, forced entry. Inside, things looked deceptively peaceful. Toys were neatly tucked away. A baby shoe lay near the crib. The air smelled faintly of scented candles. But the illusion shattered the moment officers reached the bathroom. Christine's lifeless body was in the tub. Bloodied. Bruised. Beaten with what would later be determined to be a blunt object, possibly a hammer. Her injuries were brutal. The scene told a story of rage and a botched attempt to cover it up. And then came the most chilling discovery of all. Vanessa was gone. 14 months old. No baby. No sound. No trace. What had started as a welfare check had now spiraled into a homicide and a missing child case. And as police retraced Christine's final hours, one name kept resurfacing. Jose Morales. Her boyfriend and Vanessa's father. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts painted a damning timeline. A neighbor reported seeing Jose on Saturday morning, loading a car seat into a vehicle with a little girl, almost certainly Vanessa. Another saw him at the apartment on Monday, after police had already tried to contact Christine. When investigators brought him in for questioning, Jose's demeanor was strange. He made odd remarks about how comfortable the police car was. He casually said he didn't drink or use drugs, despite what was coming. "It's not like, we're that close," he said when asked about Vanessa. "She's my girlfriend's baby. I helped her a little." Detectives noticed abrasions on his knuckles, scratches on his arms, and a visible bruise on his chest, clear signs of a recent physical altercation. Still, they released him, for now. But the investigation didn't stop. Phone records revealed a 911 call placed from Jose's phone at 2 a.m. on Saturday, December 1st. The call connected to a tower near Christine's apartment and lasted 1 minute and 14 seconds. A slurred male voice, presumably Jose, mentioned Myrtle Avenue. Then, a woman's voice broke in. "Stop. Hang up. Who are you calling?" The call disconnected. Police canvassed the area that night. But with no specific address, they found nothing. Then came a disturbing break in the case. At St. Michael's Church, a donation bin overflowed with trash bags. Inside were baby toys, clothing, and even Christine's mail, all soaked in a blood-like substance. Among the items, a diaper genie, a blood-stained towel, and a second pink crock, Vanessa's missing shoe. A charity worker found the bags and immediately called police. DNA testing confirmed Christine's blood. Some DNA was inconclusive. But none of the items had any trace of Vanessa. As evidence piled up, Jose Morales' story changed, again. He now claimed that two strangers had broken into the apartment, knocked him unconscious, murdered Christine, and abducted Vanessa, while he was high on PCP. He said he remembered little. His memory was foggy. He insisted he didn't know what had happened. But the cleanup, the donation bin, the surveillance footage, his own phone records. None of it supported his claims. This wasn't a break-in. This was personal. Christine's blood was found in Jose's car. Cell phone towers placed him at the scene. And the most damning detail? Jose never once reported Vanessa missing. The puzzle was almost complete. Except for one final, tragic piece. Vanessa was still gone. More than 5 years later, in spring 2025, Jose Morales stood in court, facing charges of murder and tampering with evidence. But what played out in the courtroom wasn't just a legal case, it was a war between truth and the story Jose tried to tell. The defense argued he was high on PCP, disoriented, and incapable of remembering the night clearly. They pushed a narrative of confusion, blackout, and intruders. The drug blurred my vision. I couldn't see clearly. I lost my balance, he testified. But the prosecution painted a very different picture. A man obsessed with control. A man whose relationship with Christine had turned volatile. A man who tried to clean up the mess, disposed of evidence, and vanished with his child. They didn't just show what he did. They showed what he didn't do. He never called 911 to report Vanessa missing. He never helped with search efforts. He never asked if she was safe. Instead, he talked about car seats and back pain. About candles. About how good the police cruiser felt. And all the while, one question remained. Where is Vanessa Morales? Fingernails didn't match Jose Morales. They tried to create enough doubt to spare him a murder conviction. But the prosecution countered each point. No forced entry, no signs of anyone else, no defensive wounds that would suggest another attacker. Vanessa Morales, just 14 months old, had vanished. Jose never reported her missing. He didn't ask for help. He didn't tell family. Instead, he dumped blood-soaked evidence into a donation bin and spun shifting tales of intruders and amnesia. The jury deliberated for days, weighing a case built on circumstantial bricks, bound together by Jose's own words and actions. In the end, the verdict was clear: guilty of murder and guilty of tampering with evidence. Still, one question echoed through the courtroom and across the country. Where is Vanessa Morales? To this day, she remains missing, a child lost in the shadows of a crime so cruel, so intimate, that even conviction brought no closure. For investigators, it was a partial victory. For Christine Holloway's family, it was justice served, but not complete. And for the world watching, it was a chilling reminder that sometimes, even after all the facts are laid bare and the guilty are named, the most important answer can still be missing. The jury didn't need long. After just a day and a half of deliberation, they came back with a verdict: guilty of murder. Jose Morales showed little emotion as the words were read aloud. Sentencing was set for July 8, 2025, where he faced up to 65 years behind bars. The jury had been instructed that proof beyond a reasonable doubt meant ruling out every reasonable explanation except guilt. And that's what they believed they had: proof not just in what Jose did, but in what he didn't do. Throughout the trial, Jose had made only passing references to Vanessa. Her name was rarely mentioned in his testimony, a silence that loomed larger than any of his words. For Christine Holloway's family, the conviction brought a measure of justice. But closure? That was something else entirely. Christine was gone. And Vanessa was still missing. Even with the trial concluded, the questions refused to fade. The biggest of all: where is Vanessa? Investigators continued to work. They re-examined every piece of evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and followed up on tips, some credible, many not. Flyers stayed up. Petitions kept circulating. And Christine's family refused to let Vanessa's name disappear from the public eye. The FBI's $10,000 reward for information remained unclaimed. No one came forward. No body. No trace. Jose Morales, now convicted, offered nothing, not a confession, not an explanation, not even a moment of apology. He stuck to his story about 2 intruders, a drug-induced haze, and selective memory loss. Legal experts debated whether PCP could really cause the kind of convenient blackout he described. But to Christine's family, there was never any doubt. They believed Jose knew exactly what happened to Vanessa. Christine's sister, Anna, became the steady voice of the family's heartbreak and hope. She appeared in interviews, released public statements, and begged for help in bringing Vanessa home. Her belief rested in what had been erased. If Vanessa had died that night, why hide her body so thoroughly? Why take everything connected to her, her clothes, her toys, her car seat, and make her vanish so completely? That question became the heartbeat of the mystery. In April 2025, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression image of Vanessa. She would be almost 6 years old now. Family and volunteers continued handing out flyers with her picture: brown eyes, brown hair, the soft, innocent face of a child the world refused to forget. One of those volunteers, Vanessa's cousin Joshua, summed up the family's pain in one sentence: "We just want her home." He spoke of the holidays she missed, of how cold it was outside, of how unreal it felt that this tragedy had happened to their own. Attention turned back to Jose Morales. From the beginning, his story had shifted. At first, he said he saw Christine and Vanessa on Monday morning. Then he changed it: he hadn't seen her since Friday. Then he said they only spoke on the phone. He couldn't remember what car Christine drove, even though he had helped her pick it out. Surveillance footage showed him coming and going from her apartment all weekend. One neighbor saw him loading a car seat into a vehicle with a little girl. Another saw him leaving after police had already begun calling Christine. And through it all, Jose acted as if he didn't know anything. Christine Holloway lived a life of love for her daughter, her family, her students. She was kind, faithful, devoted. She should have grown old watching Vanessa grow up. Instead, her life was taken, her daughter stolen, and her family left to live in a nightmare with no clear end. Jose Morales now waits for sentencing, likely to spend the rest of his life in prison. But for Christine's family and for the detectives who still carry this case with them, justice remains incomplete until Vanessa is found. Somewhere out there, a little girl may still be waiting. If you know anything at all, contact the Ansonia Police Department or the FBI tip line. Even the smallest detail could bring Vanessa home. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about the dangers that can hide behind the familiar, please share it. Like the video. Comment with your thoughts or any information you may have. Subscribe for updates on this case and others like it. Together, we can help keep Christine's story alive. And maybe, one day, find the answers that have been missing for far too long.
Well, it's about 2 weeks before the end. This is going to be my last video, probably before...
In the quiet suburb of North Bend, Washington, nestled against the Cascade Mountains, a nightmare was brewing, one that no one saw coming. The town was known for its stunning views, hiking trails, and small-town charm. But on April 22, 2012, that peace was shattered by a plume of smoke rising from the Keller residence. It was early morning when the fire department responded to the blaze. What they found inside the modest home would mark the beginning of a chilling investigation, one that would uncover murder, obsession, and a shocking descent into darkness. Inside the charred home, firefighters discovered the bodies of 41-year-old Lynette Keller and her 18-year-old daughter, Kayleen. Both had been shot in the head. The fire hadn't killed them, it had been set to cover up the murders. Suspicion immediately fell on Peter Keller, the husband and father, who was nowhere to be found. As detectives arrived on the scene, they noticed something unsettling. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication of a struggle. It was as if the killer had moved through the house with eerie calm and purpose. The family's bank accounts hadn't been touched, the car was still in the driveway, and Peter had simply vanished into thin air. What followed was one of the most bizarre manhunts Washington state had ever seen. Investigators soon learned that Peter had been planning something for years, something terrifying. He had constructed a hidden bunker deep in the Cascade Mountains. For nearly a decade, Peter had been quietly hauling supplies into the forest: wood, concrete, camouflage netting, survival gear, slowly building a fortified hideout completely off the grid. He wasn't just running away. He had prepared for this moment like it was some twisted rite of passage. When police reviewed the home surveillance system, they found a chilling detail: a laptop with a series of video journals Peter had recorded in the days leading up to the murders. In them, he spoke in a calm, almost detached tone, confessing to what he was about to do. "I ended up shooting both my wife and daughter in the head," he said on one of the recordings. "I'm sure they didn't feel anything. I didn't want them to feel any pain." He talked about how he knew he'd have to kill them to escape, to start over in the mountains, to live off the land. "I always knew I'd have to kill them eventually," he muttered, as if it were just a footnote in his bizarre manifesto. This wasn't just a crime, it was a calculated purge of his old life. Peter Keller saw himself as a survivalist, someone rejecting modern society. But in reality, he was a man running from responsibility, consumed by paranoia and delusion. What kind of person calmly films themselves discussing the murder of their own family? What kind of father chooses isolation over love? As the manhunt for Peter Keller intensified, search teams scoured the Cascade foothills, facing dense forests, steep terrain, and unpredictable weather. For days, there was no sign of him. Helicopters circled above, while ground teams combed the trails. Authorities believed he had fled into the wilderness he knew so well. Peter wasn't just hiding, he was surviving. He had been preparing for this scenario for years, studying survivalist techniques, gathering supplies, and building what he believed to be the perfect refuge. The bunker he constructed was invisible to the average hiker, camouflaged beneath tree cover and hidden behind brush. It was reinforced with concrete and equipped with food, water, weapons, and even books. While search teams worked tirelessly, the public was left reeling. The story was as terrifying as it was surreal. A seemingly normal father, an IT technician, a man who lived in a quiet neighborhood, married for over 2 decades, had snapped. But had he really snapped? Or had this been building for years under the surface? Those who knew the family described them as quiet and reserved. Lynette was kind-hearted, hard-working, and deeply devoted to Kayleen, who had just turned 18 and was preparing to graduate high school. There were no visible signs of abuse. No domestic violence calls. No alarming behavior. But behind the closed doors of that North Bend home, Peter Keller was planning something horrifying. In one of his video diaries, Peter calmly detailed his reasoning. "I can't live in this world anymore," he said. "It's falling apart. I want to be alone. I want to live free. But I couldn't leave them behind." That twisted logic became his justification for murdering his wife and daughter. In his mind, he was sparing them from what he believed was the inevitable collapse of society. The apocalypse he imagined wasn't on the horizon, but Peter had convinced himself it was only a matter of time. He documented everything. How he planned the murders, how he moved their bodies, how he set the fire, and how he escaped into the forest. The videos were disturbingly methodical, like a how-to guide for a man detaching from his humanity. After nearly a week, on April 28, 2012, search teams finally got a break. A SWAT team member noticed a piece of camouflage that didn't quite blend into the landscape. They had stumbled upon Peter Keller's bunker. As the team approached, they moved with caution, knowing he was armed and likely prepared for a standoff. They surrounded the hideout and issued commands, but there was no response. For hours, they waited. Eventually, they deployed tear gas into the bunker. The air grew thick, and the team prepared to move in. When they finally entered, they discovered Peter Keller's body. He had taken his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The manhunt was over, but the horror he left behind would linger for years. As the initial shock faded, the long process of healing began, slow, painful, and incomplete. Peter Keller's actions didn't just end 2 lives, they shattered countless others. Lynette's relatives struggled with guilt. Some asked themselves if they had missed the signs, if there had been a way to stop what happened. Kayleen's classmates faced grief counseling, unable to comprehend how their friend, who once smiled and laughed beside them in the hallways, was now gone. The once peaceful home the Kellers had built together was left behind as a grim reminder of what had occurred, boarded up, silent, and heavy with memories. In the wake of the tragedy, law enforcement and mental health professionals used the case as a tragic example of the consequences of untreated psychological decline. They began pushing harder for community awareness of behavioral red flags and mental instability. Peter Keller had isolated himself mentally long before he physically retreated into the wilderness. He had become obsessed with control over his environment, his destiny, and ultimately, the people in his life. To him, the world was a place of danger and deceit. In his twisted logic, the only way to escape was to start over, alone. The remnants of his bunker remained a macabre curiosity for years. Hidden deep within the forest, the structure symbolized the horrifying intersection between survivalist paranoia and domestic tragedy. It was professionally dismantled by authorities after evidence collection, but stories of it circulated for years. Hikers would whisper about the Killer's Cave hidden somewhere in the Washington wilderness, though few could pinpoint the location. For some, it became a chilling cautionary tale. For others, it was a dark symbol of how even the most ordinary lives could hide unimaginable horrors. As time passed, documentaries and podcasts revisited the story, each adding more insight, speculation, and sorrow to the narrative. The tragedy became part of true crime lore. Not just because of the shocking murders, but because of the disturbing calmness behind them. Peter Keller didn't scream, rant, or rage. He built. He planned. He recorded. And then he vanished. His face, emotionless, cold, became etched into the memories of all who followed the story. But amid all the horror, the memories of Lynette and Kayleen remained the most powerful. Family members and friends made it their mission to honor their lives, not just mourn their deaths. A scholarship fund was created in Kayleen's name, helping other young women pursue their dreams the way she never got to. Community centers hosted talks about recognizing signs of mental illness and the importance of early intervention. Lynette was remembered as a loving mother, a kind friend, and a woman who deserved better than the fate she met. In the end, Peter Keller's attempt to disappear into the woods forever failed. Though he died alone in the bunker he built, the world did not forget him. Nor the horror he left behind. But more importantly, the world remembered Lynette and Kayleen. Their stories, once eclipsed by the violence of their deaths, became symbols of love, resilience, and the urgent need to protect those who may silently suffer in the shadows. The story of Peter Keller is one that leaves behind far more questions than answers, a haunting reminder of how darkness can dwell silently behind the most ordinary of doors. He was not a stranger, he was a father, a husband, a man who lived quietly in a suburban neighborhood. Yet behind that quiet exterior was a growing obsession with survivalism, control, and isolation. His descent into paranoia didn't explode overnight, it was a slow burn that finally ignited into the unimaginable. When Peter shot and killed his wife Lynette and their 18-year-old daughter Kayleen, he didn't act in a moment of rage. He acted with cold deliberation, methodically carrying out a plan he had spent years preparing for. What made this case so chilling wasn't just the brutality of the murders. It was the calmness, the precision, and the disturbing lack of remorse. Peter didn't run in panic. He vanished into a hidden bunker deep in the woods, built over 8 years with the sole purpose of escaping society. He had filmed parts of it, documenting not only the construction of his hideout but also his distorted thoughts about what he believed was coming. His bunker was well stocked, expertly concealed, and terrifyingly efficient, proof that this wasn't a man who snapped. This was a man who prepared to destroy and disappear. Even as law enforcement launched a massive manhunt, Peter remained hidden for days, watching news coverage of his own crimes on a portable TV inside his bunker. When authorities finally closed in, he chose to take his own life rather than face justice. And so, he died alone, surrounded by the supplies meant to sustain a future he never got to live. His suicide robbed the families of Lynette and Kayleen of answers, closure, and justice. But the story doesn't end with his death. The aftermath left a ripple effect that touched everyone who knew the family, everyone who lived in that community, and even those who only heard about it in the news. Lynette's loved ones were left broken, haunted by what they didn't see, by what they couldn't stop. Kayleen's friends mourned a girl who had her entire life ahead of her, bright, joyful, and full of promise. A home that once held laughter was now a crime scene. A family that once celebrated birthdays and holidays was now reduced to headlines. Still, in the wake of tragedy, something powerful happened. The community chose to remember Lynette and Kayleen not as victims, but as people. A scholarship was started in Kayleen's name. Talks on mental health and domestic danger began to take place. And slowly, their memories became a call to action. Peter Keller's story is one of warning, of how unchecked isolation and mental instability can lead to devastation. But the legacy of his victims is one of love, unity, and a resolve to never let another tragedy like this unfold unseen. And so, what began as a quiet family life ended in a bunker buried deep in the woods, sealed by bullets, betrayal, and an obsession that turned deadly. Peter Keller vanished into the shadows of his own mind long before he disappeared into that mountain. His legacy is not one of survival or rebellion. It's a chilling symbol of how darkness, when left unspoken, can rot the soul and destroy everything it touches. But Lynette and Kayleen, they are the names we remember. They are the voices that matter. This story is for them. It's for the warning signs ignored, the masks people wear, and the silence that screams louder than words. If this story made your heart pause, if it made you think twice about the people we assume we know, then don't let it fade. Share their names. Talk about the unseen dangers of isolation and untreated mental illness. Subscribe for more true crime stories that peel back the curtain on the unthinkable. And remember, behind every face is a story. Some just never get the chance to tell theirs.
My sister is kind and quirky and caring and my best friend.
When I last heard from her, I hugged her behind her and I put you in and I know I was really bad.
Friday, March the 31st, 2023. A cool spring morning in Winona, Minnesota. The day started like any other for 26-year-old Madeline Kingsbury, a devoted mother, a hard-working professional, and a woman quietly preparing for a new chapter in her life.
26-year-old Madeline Kingsbury, the day started like any other. She was a loving mother, a respected medical professional, and a woman on the verge of starting a new chapter. But before the sun had fully risen, that ordinary day would spiral into a nightmare, one that would grip a community and devastate a family. Madeline Kingsbury vanished without a trace. And what followed was a case filled with heartbreak, deception, and disturbing similarities to one of America's most haunting tragedies.
The Fillmore County community and surrounding areas are coming together to bring her home.
When's the last time you heard from her or anything like that?
Madeline, known affectionately as Maddie, was up early that Friday morning. She and her longtime partner, Adam Fravel, were co-parenting their 2 children, a 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. Together, they dropped the kids off at daycare around 8 a.m. Surveillance footage captured their dark blue Chrysler minivan pulling back into the driveway shortly afterward. It was the last known footage of Madeline Kingsbury alive. According to Adam, they returned home and she mentioned a work meeting in Rochester. Then she was gone. Just gone. But her phone? Still inside. Her wallet, keys, ID? Also inside. The van? Parked outside. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Nothing packed. It was as if she vanished into thin air. Born June 1, 1996, in Winona, Minnesota, Maddie was the youngest of 3 siblings. Her family described her as smart, warm, and full of life. She had a sharp wit, a kind heart, and a drive that carried her from Winona State University to the Mayo Clinic, where she worked as a clinical research coordinator. She was also pursuing a master's degree in public health administration while raising her 2 young children. To friends and family, she was Superwoman, juggling work, school, and motherhood with grace. But behind closed doors, things were far more complicated. Adam Fravel wasn't just Maddie's co-parent. He was the father of her children and her on-again, off-again partner. But according to Maddie's loved ones, he was also manipulative, emotionally abusive, and controlling. Maddie had been quietly searching for a new home. She wanted to leave. She was planning to start over, without him. She just hadn't told him yet. In the weeks before her disappearance, she had confided in friends that Adam frightened her.
Closer
He
to
had
finding
once
a
pinned her
suspect
down
or
and
person
told
of
her she'd
interest.
end up like Gabby
Again, it's
Petito
open and
if she
active.
didn't
The
listen.
leads that are coming in
That
is
wasn't a joke.
unbelievable. We are actually
Maddie
getting
told a
hundreds
friend,
of them.
it wasn't
We
funny.
have a lot of...
That's what sealed it for me. She was scared. And she was right to be. At 8:15 a.m. on March 31st, Maddie sent a final text message. Nothing unusual, just a normal reply. But that would be her last communication with the world.
Do you know where Maddie is? Did you have anything to do with her disappearance? Did you? Yeah. I just think you're dealing with a lot here. I think you've been dealing with a lot here. You have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old together. So I think something happened in that apartment.
Well, from you guys' perspective, why would I hurt or make the mother of my children disappear?
Because you're pissed.
I don't know that. Maybe it just happened.
By 10 a.m., Adam claimed Maddie had left for her work meeting. But her vehicle was still there. Her personal items untouched. She hadn't made any calls. No emails. No sign she'd left willingly. When Maddie failed to respond to calls and didn't show up to pick up her kids later that day, her family became alarmed. They called police at 8:20 p.m. Officers arrived to find a chilling scene, no sign of a break-in, no packed bags, and everything Maddie needed for daily life still inside. She hadn't walked away. Something had happened. From the very beginning, Adam's story didn't add up. He said Maddie left on her own.
Well, from you guys' perspective, why would I hurt or make the mother of my children disappear?
Because you're pissed.
I don't know that. Maybe it just happened.
But footage showed him removing and switching license plates on the minivan just before 10 a.m., a calculated move suggesting he wanted the vehicle to be harder to trace. Investigators also noted a 45-minute gap in Adam's movements that morning, time that couldn't be accounted for. When questioned, Adam offered vague and conflicting answers. His demeanor was cold, controlled. Investigators pressed him. Why would she leave without her phone, her ID, or a vehicle? She wouldn't, they insisted. You were the last person to see her. As pressure mounted, Adam started to shut down. Now I'm putting up a wall. I probably need to.
I tried calling her a bunch of times, I think 3:30 and like 3:45 and 4, and I didn't get any response, so I just picked up the kids myself.
You know anybody in town she might be with? Any clubs or organizations she's affiliated with?
Not clubs or anything.
Does she do it like a weekly thing, like a girls' night out or anything like that, usually?
No, nothing like that.
Anywhere else in town you think she might be?
At this time at night, no.
Did she ever go to the bars at all?
No, we're not drinkers at all.
To get a lawyer. Over the next 2 months, the search for Maddie became one of the largest in Minnesota's history. Volunteers, rescue teams, and law enforcement scoured fields, rivers, and dense woods. Thousands joined the effort. But there was no trace of her. In public, Adam remained silent. He refused to help search. He refused to speak at vigils. And most tellingly, he refused to take custody of his own children. Behind the scenes, investigators were watching him closely. On June 7, 2023, more than 2 months after she vanished, a tip came in. Human remains had been found near the Mississippi River in a remote wooded area of Fillmore County, 46 miles south of Winona. The body had been hidden well, left to the elements. But it was clear it had been there for weeks. Investigators moved quickly. 2 days later, the news broke: the remains were confirmed to be Madeline Kingsbury. The community grieved. Her family was devastated. But the question now wasn't where Maddie was. It was who had put her there, and why. By the time Maddie's body was discovered, the evidence against Adam Fravel was overwhelming. Surveillance footage. A broken timeline. Changed license plates. History of abuse. And a chilling comment to Maddie about becoming the next Gabby Petito. Friends, family, and co-workers all painted the same picture: Maddie was trying to leave. Adam couldn't accept it.
Since we don't communicate with him and his family, all we can really go off of is kind of what they say on social media. And it's mostly,
wanting to get out of there as soon as possible. I would agree with the last thing you just said about wanting to get out of there as soon as possible, because if that was the case, it would have happened.
On June 9, just hours after the confirmation of her identity, Adam Fravel was arrested and charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Prosecutors allege that he killed her at home, disposed of her body alone, and did everything he could to mislead investigators and buy time. But time ran out.
Madeline, who's been missing since March 31st of this year from Winona, her ex, Adam Fravel, has officially been arrested.
Maddie's story is not just another case. She was a mother, a daughter, a sister, a best friend. She had goals, dreams, a life that mattered, and 2 children who will grow up without her. Her death leaves behind echoes of too many women before her. Women failed by partners who couldn't stand to lose control. Women who tried to leave and didn't make it. But Maddie's family is determined that her legacy will not be silence. They've launched awareness campaigns, domestic violence resources, and community outreach in her name. We miss her laugh. Her energy. The way she loved her kids, her sister said. She deserves justice. And she deserves to be remembered. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please seek help. No one deserves to live in fear. Madeline Kingsbury tried to leave. She didn't get the chance. But maybe someone else will, because of her story. Candle rest in peace, Maddie. For over 2 months, Madeline Kingsbury's family lived in agonizing limbo, clinging to hope, haunted by dread. They organized community searches, held candlelight vigils, and plastered posters across Minnesota. Every sunrise came with a question: where is Maddie? That question was finally answered on June 7, 2023. It was a Wednesday when the call came in. A team of searchers, following a lead in a remote area of Fillmore County, discovered human remains hidden in dense brush, wrapped in bedding, stuffed inside garbage bags. It was a shallow grave, hastily made, hidden off a gravel road near the Mississippi River. 2 days later, it was confirmed, the body was Madeline Kingsbury's. She had been there the whole time, just 45 miles from her home, left to decompose in silence while her loved ones pleaded for answers. The discovery devastated her family, but it also gave them something they hadn't had in 69 excruciating days: certainty. The very next day, Adam Fravel was arrested. Police had been circling him since day one. Now, with Maddie's body recovered and forensic evidence tying him to the crime, they made their move. Adam was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, one for intentionally killing Maddie, and another for causing her death during an act of domestic assault. Prosecutors allege that Adam murdered Maddie in the home they once shared. He had motive: she was planning to leave him and seek full custody of their children. He had means: he had access to her schedule, her routine, her trust. And he had time, just enough to hide her body and create a cover story. But what he didn't have was a way to erase who Maddie was to the world. Because Maddie wasn't just a victim, she was a mother of 2, a brilliant researcher at the Mayo Clinic, a sister, a daughter, a friend. She was fiercely intelligent, funny, determined. She was building a life, not just for herself, but for her children. In the weeks that followed Adam's arrest, the community grieved together. Maddie's family spoke at vigils, urging people to remember not just how she died, but how she lived. They set up a fund in her name to support victims of domestic abuse, determined to turn their pain into something powerful. Because in the end, Madeline Kingsbury's story isn't just about a crime. It's about the silence so many women live under. It's about the red flags people often see, but dismiss. It's about a system that still doesn't always protect those trying to escape. Maddie tried to leave. She took steps. She had a plan. And that still wasn't enough. So if her story does anything, let it open eyes. Let it start conversations. Let it remind us that behind every smiling photo is a life we don't always see. And behind every disappearance, there may be someone who was screaming for help, long before they went quiet. Rest in peace, Madeline Kingsbury. You were loved. You mattered. And you will never, ever be forgotten.
911. I need an ambulance. What's the address? I need help, please. What's going on there? My husband just got shot.
To see an Evansville firefighter gunned down in front of his own home is something that we weren't really prepared for.
Now I hear about the puppet. I don't even know how many. I did not see.
Is this your husband?
Yes. About 5 shots. Yeah, his name is Robert Dorg. He's a firefighter.
A loving husband, a dedicated firefighter, a man with no known enemies, gunned down in cold blood just feet from his front door. No sign of robbery. No witnesses. Just silence. But in less than 12 hours, his wife was already at the fire department, asking about his pension. This is the story of Robbie Dorr, a respected firefighter from Evansville, Indiana. A man whose life was defined by service, until it was ended by a single, ruthless act of violence.
Sorry, I'm trying not to cry. That was my best friend, and now he's never gonna meet his grandson.
But what at first looked like a senseless killing soon revealed itself to be something far more sinister, a calculated plot, carried out by someone dangerously close. What investigators uncovered would shake an entire community: a web of deleted phone calls, a stolen murder weapon, and a convicted killer with ties to Robbie's own family. At the heart of it all was Elizabeth "Becky" Dorr, Robbie's wife, and her disturbing connection to a man named Larry Richmond Sr., an ex-con with a violent past. This wasn't just a murder. It was an execution, carefully orchestrated down to the minute, with a motive rooted in greed, and a trail of clues that would take nearly 2 years to fully unravel. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of a case that stunned us.
I don't even know how many. I did not see.
Is this your husband?
Yeah, his name is Robert Dorg. He's a firefighter.
City, a tale of betrayal, deception, and the fatal price of putting trust in the wrong person. April 22, 2022, Evansville, Indiana. Just after 7 p.m., a quiet residential street is rocked by the sound of gunfire. Robbie Dorr had just returned home from work. As a seasoned firefighter, this was routine, park the car, step out, walk to the front door. But that evening, he never made it inside. Neighbors heard the shots. Some ran to their windows. Others called 911. What they found was horrifying. Robbie was lying in his driveway, shot multiple times from behind. There were no signs of a struggle. No forced entry. His wallet was untouched. Nothing was stolen from the home or his vehicle. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong, police would later say. This was an execution. Robbie had been ambushed. Someone had been lying in wait, watching and waiting for the exact moment to strike. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood immediately. They knocked on doors, asked questions, and looked for security footage. But no one had seen anything unusual, no suspicious vehicles, no unfamiliar faces. Whoever did this had planned it well and vanished without a trace. The only clues were shell casings at the scene, and the eerie quiet that followed. Then, in a tense moment captured on police body cam, officers approached a distraught family member. Studio microphone officer. Is he alive? Studio microphone family member, crying. No, he's not. Oh my God. As detectives tried to make sense of the crime scene, a far—
Yes. Stay on the line. I'll connect you to the ambulance service, okay? I got him on the phone. Rob. I don't know. I just heard a bunch of popping. Please get somebody here. Rob. Oh my God.
Just been sent. Ma'am, I need you to listen to me, okay, ma'am? Just been sent. Tell me what happened.
I don't know. I saw a truck pull in. I saw his headlights. Okay, what kind of vehicle was it? Ma'am, all I saw was my husband's headlights pull into the driveway, and then I heard a bunch of popping. My husband's 51 years old. His name is— oh my God, please hurry.
Her statement immediately raised suspicions, as the kitchen window directly overlooked the driveway.
But not the kind you'd expect from a grieving spouse. She wanted to know about Robbie's pension, said one firefighter. And his death benefits. According to city records, Becky was entitled to 75% of Robbie's pension for life, plus a $112,000 lump sum payout. The department staff was stunned. No funeral arrangements had been made. Robbie's friends were still in shock. And yet here was his wife, talking dollars and cents.
Sorry, I'm trying not to cry. That was my best friend, and now he's never gonna meet his grandson.
It wasn't just callous, it was suspicious. And for detectives, this would be the first red flag in what would soon become a case full of them. When someone is murdered, police look at the victim's inner circle first. Family, friends, finances, grudges. But what they found on Becky Dorr's phone raised immediate alarms, and opened the door to a darker truth. As investigators turned their attention to Becky, they subpoenaed her phone records. What they discovered shocked them. At 6:51 p.m., just minutes before Robbie was shot, Becky received a phone call. It lasted exactly 4 minutes and 18 seconds. The caller? A man named Larry Richmond Sr. Age, 46. Criminal record, disturbing. Larry Richmond Sr. was a convicted murderer, having served 45 years in prison for the 1996 killing of a 70-year-old man named James Everett Montgomery. He had only been released in 2021, less than a year before Robbie's death. Even more disturbingly, Larry wasn't a stranger. He was engaged to Becky's sister, Amanda. That made him family, and a man with deadly potential. But it wasn't just that one call. Detectives discovered that Becky had been in regular contact with Larry for months leading up to the murder. At least 15 phone calls had been made between them, and deleted. Becky had gone out of her way to erase those conversations. Why? What was she hiding? If there was nothing to cover up, why delete the calls? During questioning, Larry didn't deny knowing Robbie.
It's not just
In
you down
fact,
here.
he claimed they'd gone out drinking
Obviously, we're
together a
looking
few
into the
times.
Robert Dorr
We go out.
situation. He was
We
gunned down
drink.
in his driveway.
Outside of that, I don't know
Well,
nothing.
It has to
I
do
didn't
with
do nothing,
everybody in the family. We
but
just trying to get
investigators
everybody in
weren't
here
buying it,
to see if there's just
especially after
anything
they discovered
that
a
can
crucial
help us
piece
with
of
this
the puzzle, the
investigation.
murder weapon.
Do you wish to talk to me without a lawyer present?
The revolver used to kill Robbie had been reported stolen from a local pawn shop 6 months earlier, a powerful tourist judge, capable of firing both .45 caliber rounds and shotgun shells. That pawn shop, River City Pawn, had a very familiar name on its employee list at the time of the theft, Larry Richmond Jr., the son of Larry Richmond Sr. When confronted, Larry Jr. confessed. He admitted to stealing the gun and handing it off to his father, just 2 days before Robbie's murder. It was all coming together, one detective recalled. The weapon, the phone calls, the deleted records, it wasn't random. It was a plan. A plan that now seemed to involve not just a cold-blooded ex-convict, but also Robbie's own wife. The noose was tightening, and Becky's role was becoming harder to ignore. Sometimes, the most damning evidence doesn't come from a lab or a surveillance feed. Sometimes, it's scribbled in ink, raw, personal, and unfiltered. At Robbie's funeral, emotions were high. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered to mourn a man they loved. A decorated firefighter. A loyal friend. A son. A husband. And it was at that funeral, among the flowers, prayers, and tears, that someone found something strange. A handwritten note. Signed simply, Larry. It read, "We need to talk. 81258952238, Larry." Who brings a note like that to a funeral? Investigators quickly seized it as evidence. The handwriting matched Larry Richmond Sr.'s. The note proved that he and Becky were still communicating, even after Robbie's murder. This wasn't over. This wasn't regret. This was ongoing contact. As detectives dug deeper, a disturbing narrative began to form. One that painted Becky Dorr as something far more sinister than a grieving widow. A letter written by Robbie before his death added fuel to the fire. In it, he accused Becky of being unfaithful. Though there was no proof of a romantic relationship between her and Larry, the implication lingered, and so did suspicion. Then came the most powerful testimony yet, from someone who knew Becky better than anyone. Her own son, Nathaniel. Nathaniel testified that in the weeks leading up to Robbie's murder, his mother had become obsessed with Robbie's pension. It was a conversation we had almost every day. I told her, "Mom, there are procedures. There's a process." But she just kept bringing it up. Nathaniel told the jury that Becky talked constantly about money, not grief, not healing, not her husband's memory. Just the benefits. Detectives had already verified that Becky stood to receive 75% of Robbie's pension, for life, and a $112,000 lump sum death benefit. And she wasn't waiting. She went to inquire about that money less than 12 hours after Robbie's death. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was motive. The combination of deleted calls, the link to a convicted murderer, the stolen weapon, the funeral note, and the financial obsession, it all added up to something cold and calculated. But the evidence didn't stop there. Cell phone location data placed Larry Richmond Sr. near Robbie's home before and after the murder. His phone was powered off at 6:52 p.m., just after his 4-minute call with Becky, and turned back on at 7:14 p.m., right after Robbie was gunned down. It was as if Larry had deliberately gone dark, vanishing off the grid while the crime occurred. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a cover. All signs pointed to one conclusion: Becky Dorr and Larry Richmond Sr. had conspired to kill Robbie Dorr. For money, possibly for love, but certainly with cold intent. The state had its case. Now, it was time for a jury to hear the full story. It was the spring of 2024 when the courtroom doors opened and the people of Evansville filled the benches. This was justice, years in the making. Elizabeth Becky Dorr stood trial for the murder of her husband, Robbie Dorr, a man beloved by his community, brutally executed in his own driveway.
There will be no evidence that Becky Dorr had any conversation with anyone about killing anyone. That doesn't exist. That is a speculative, suppositional, grandiose suggestion to support a charge that should have never been filed. You will hear no evidence of Becky Dorr talking about getting a gun. You'll hear no evidence about a conversation with anyone that's plotting her husband's death. That evidence does not exist.
Her lawyers pointed out that there were no recorded conversations discussing a murder plot, no texts, no written orders, just circumstantial evidence.
Strong about the case, but I have doubts. I mean, I can't be on the phone conversation with him that night. The deleted phone.
You have. Let's sort of get this out in the open.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a phone conversation that you asked Becky about at some point, correct?
Correct.
And you allege it's with Larry Richmond Sr., right?
It is, yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You have no idea what they talked about, do you?
No.
And you know who initiated that call, don't you?
He did.
Who?
Larry Richmond Sr.
He did. In fact, in your investigation, you don't have any evidence that Becky Dorr ever initiated a phone conversation of any kind with Larry Richmond Sr., correct?
Correct.
In fact, this idea that is floated that these two were lovers, you don't have any communication between the two of them that would suggest that, do you?
Correct.
So if there's been a representation that there's going to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Becky Dorr and Larry Richmond Sr. were lovers, that evidence doesn't exist, does it?
Correct. But that's where, may I speak? Yes. May I speak, sir? Okay, thank you. When we talked about doubt, that's what, because we can't get content from a phone conversation. That's why I have to take her. Now, looking at everything that has come in, I don't believe her answer. That's where I felt strong. I feel strong about the case, but my doubt is I can't listen to the phone conversation. People can delete text messages between the two.
Right.
And we can't prove but they can discard them before we collect the phone. That happens all the time.
Her contact with Larry could be explained by family ties. After all, he was engaged to her sister, Amanda. There's no proof she knew what Larry was planning. You can't convict a woman on suspicion alone. But the prosecution reminded the jury, this wasn't just suspicion. This was deleted phone records, secret communications, a sudden interest in death benefits, a note at a funeral, and a stolen gun in the hands of a man who had already killed once before. You don't need to be the one pulling the trigger to be guilty of murder. The jury listened. The evidence was overwhelming. But one question still loomed large. What was the final straw? What finally convinced Becky Dorr to end her husband's life? When the trial ended, the courtroom fell silent. Years of grief, speculation, and painful truths now rested in the hands of 12 strangers, the jury. They had heard the evidence, the deleted phone calls, the stolen weapon, the suspicious timing of Becky's inquiry about the pension. They had listened to Becky's own son testify against her, painting her not as a grieving widow, but as a cold and calculating conspirator. It didn't take long. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. The words landed like thunder. Elizabeth Becky Dorr was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, and guilty of facilitating the murder of her husband, Robbie Dorr. As the verdict was read, Becky showed no visible emotion. No tears. No breakdown. Just silence. But across the aisle, Robbie's family broke down. His fellow firefighters gripped each other's shoulders. After nearly 3 years, justice had finally arrived. For a community that had lost one of its own, the wound would never fully heal. But the truth, at least, was finally revealed. At sentencing, the prosecution didn't hold back. Robbie Dorr dedicated his life to saving others. He should have been safe in his own driveway. Instead, his wife, the one person who should have protected him, betrayed him for money. The judge handed down a sentence that matched the crime. Becky Dorr will spend the rest of her life behind bars for orchestrating her husband's murder. But she wasn't alone. Shortly after, Larry Richmond Sr. was also tried and convicted for his role in the crime. The man with a prior murder conviction now faced his second life sentence, this time for being a hitman in a suburban conspiracy fueled by money, secrets, and betrayal. 2 lives gone. 1 to death. 1 to prison. And in the middle of it all, a legacy of pain that stretched across families, generations, and an entire community. After the trial, Robbie's brother spoke to the press. Robbie was the kind of guy who would run into a burning building to save a stranger. He deserved so much more than this. We'll never stop missing him, but at least now, we know the truth. The Evansville Fire Department held a memorial in Robbie's honor. His fellow firefighters remembered him as a loyal friend, a dedicated professional, and a man who deserved love, not betrayal. He was taken in the most cowardly of ways, ambushed in his driveway, just feet from the home he shared with his wife. But what his killers couldn't take was the legacy he left behind. Robbie Doerr's story is a chilling reminder. Sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the people closest to us. This was a man who spent his life protecting others, only to be betrayed by the one person he trusted most. Justice came slowly, but it came. And with it, the truth rose to the surface. Rest in peace, Robbie Doerr. You will never be forgotten.
Has he been before? Oh, shoot. You said you see blood? Go run back. Get EMS out here. Oh boy. There's a lot of blood.
I'm wondering if I'd be able to request a wellness check on someone. Okay, what's going on?
Good.
2015-4.
Oh boy. There's a lot of blood.
Hudson, Ohio. A town where crime is more the stuff of novels than of news. Tree-lined streets, wraparound porches, friendly neighbors, this was not the place where you'd expect something truly horrifying to unfold. But inside one suburban home on a calm April morning in 2023, something was terribly wrong.
Party looks to be... I might have fell. Oh,
When police arrived for a wellness check, they expected silence. What they found instead was a scene of quiet carnage, a man lying in a pool of blood, lifeless, alone, and dressed in nothing but a robe. Bullet casings were scattered across the floor. But there was no weapon. This wasn't just another domestic tragedy. It was the beginning of a disturbing case that would peel back the illusion of safety in one of Ohio's most peaceful communities. And as we'll discover, it all began when a 5-year-old girl waited at school for a father who would never come. Dr. Todd Morgan was a man people respected. A finance professor at Cleveland State University, known for his sharp mind, well-ironed shirts, and thoughtful lectures. His students described him as professional but kind. His neighbors called him quiet, but polite. He was also a father. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, without fail, Todd picked up his 5-year-old daughter from school. Rain or shine, her little backpack zipped tight, she'd run into his arms at pickup, until the day she didn't.
Say it's pretty bad in there.
Yeah, we're showcasing in the house all over.
Okay.
No equipment.
Keep the... Okay.
He's been sitting there for a while. That blood's dried up.
Okay.
Can you tell me?
What's that?
It looks weird.
April 19, 2023, started like any other. But when the school receptionist realized no one had come for the girl, when Mary, Todd's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his daughter, couldn't reach him, concern became panic. Mary picked up their daughter herself, confused but trying not to show it. She tried calling Todd. No answer. Texts left on read. Voicemail. Still, it wasn't like him to disappear. So she called the police. Hudson PD quickly responded to the wellness check.
Call from the school that she was still at the school, so I ended up picking her up. They tried to contact him. I tried to call him a couple times and haven't received anything back.
And what's his name?
Todd Morgan.
Officers Peggy and Bowen were dispatched to his home on West Streetsboro Street, a large, tidy house that stood like any other in the neighborhood. But behind its pristine walls was a nightmare waiting to be uncovered. The sun had barely risen when officers Peggy and Bowen arrived at the house. Everything looked normal. Todd's luxury SUV was parked neatly in the driveway. Porch light still on. No sign of forced entry from the front. But something didn't sit right. They walked around back. That's when they saw it, blood. Smeared across the bottom of the glass patio door. Inside, through the glass, they spotted the body. Officer Bowen stepped in slowly. His body cam caught the whispered reactions. "Oh boy. There's a lot of blood. Already looks to be, might have fell. Crap, oh wow." Todd was lying near the back door, in a bathrobe. His head rested in dried blood. But what confused them even more was the scattering of shell casings near his body, and the absence of any firearm. "We've got shell casings in the house," an officer radioed in. "But no weapon. That's weird. Had Todd shot himself? Maybe. But where was the gun?"
So, your phone, why would it dial 911 in the morning at April 19th around 7:22 in the morning? My phone? Yeah.
Had it been removed? Had someone staged the scene? The rest of the house offered no clarity, just more confusion. In the master bedroom, open condom wrappers, empty bottles of alcohol. In a child's bedroom, an overturned piggy bank, coins scattered across the carpet. The officers knew something was wrong. This didn't feel like a suicide. It didn't feel like a robbery either. It felt personal. Chaotic. Violent. And then, the chilling twist, Todd's phone had dialed 911 at 7:21 a.m. that morning. A call where no one spoke. But someone had been there, at the exact time of his death. Detectives arrived at the house within the hour. Forensics began their sweep. The absence of a weapon meant one thing: this wasn't suicide. It was murder. The call from Todd's phone, silent but real, became their starting point. From there, they pulled digital records, scoured surveillance footage, and reviewed phone logs. That's when a name surfaced: Terriana Pahel Young. Her name appeared repeatedly in Todd's phone, calls, texts, Bumble chat messages. Todd had met her on a dating app. Cash App showed transfers to her. And her number? It was the one that dialed 911 from his phone. Detectives tracked her down for questioning.
You ever been to Hudson before? We've all around the Okay. But you can't recall me in person?
Detective, have you ever been to Hudson? Terriana, no. Detective, your phone was there. Terriana, I don't know why my phone would be there. She denied knowing Todd. Denied ever visiting his home. Denied making the 911 call. But the digital evidence said otherwise. Her DNA was found in Todd's house, on black and mild cigars, on everyday items. And then came the video. Surveillance footage from a neighboring house showed a vehicle that matched hers near Todd's house the morning of the murder. Even more suspicious, she changed her phone number just days after Todd died. Still, she insisted, she wasn't there. She didn't know him. She didn't do anything. But the data told a different story. So what happened that morning? Investigators believe Todd invited Terriana to his home. It wasn't the first time, they had met before. Maybe he expected company. Maybe she expected payment. Something went wrong. Maybe he didn't want to give her money. Maybe she got angry. Maybe it was planned all along. What is known is this: sometime before 7:21 a.m., Todd was shot in the head. The 911 call from his phone, possibly dialed in a panic, or by accident, lasted just a few seconds. No one spoke. Investigators believe Tariana may have shot him, then tried to clean up or stage the scene. She possibly overturned the child's piggy bank to make it look like a robbery. Then she vanished, taking the murder weapon with her. It has still never been found. No fingerprints on a gun. No confession. Just digital traces. A trail of messages. Her DNA on objects in the house. Her car near the scene. The silent 911 call. The missing weapon. The lie she told. A picture was forming. And as detectives reconstructed the timeline, it became clear. Todd didn't die by accident.
You heard the two shots, I'm assuming, I don't know, and then I thought someone was banging on something, and then a little pause, and then four more.
He didn't die by suicide. He was murdered in his own home by someone he let in. Police arrested Tariana Pahel Young. She was charged with aggravated murder, tampering with evidence, and more. Her trial has yet to begin. Her defense? She maintains she never met Todd Morgan. Never visited Hudson. Never called 911. But prosecutors feel confident. They have DNA. They have surveillance footage. They have motive, timeline, and lies. The community of Hudson was shaken. A man who had once been seen as a model father and professor was now the center of a murder case. Parents whispered at pickup. Neighbors watched their cameras. Strangers asked, how could this happen here? At Cleveland State, Todd's death hit hard. Faculty and students mourned. A scholarship fund was created in his name. But no one mourned harder than his daughter. The little girl still too young to fully understand what had happened. Still asking when Daddy was coming back.
A lot of information. We have DNA evidence, we have video, we have phone call, we have mumbled chat messages. Okay, we have shell casings, we have shoe prints. We've got a lot of stuff.
That morning, as the last children were picked up from school, a teacher stood with a small girl still waiting by the door. She clutched her backpack. Watched the road. Looked for her father's car.
To explain to her that her daddy wouldn't be coming back because someone had hurt him. I watched her curl up in my arms, hiding her face as
she waited, and waited, until the last teacher turned off the lights. Todd Morgan was more than a victim. He was a father. A professor. A man who tried to find connection in a disconnected world. And Tariana Young? If guilty, she's not just a killer. She's the shadow of something much darker, the risk that hides in the most innocent-seeming places. A dating app. A casual message. A moment of trust. This case isn't just about murder. It's about vulnerability. Digital footprints. Trust shattered by strangers. In a town like Hudson, crime wasn't supposed to happen. But on April 19, 2023, it did. And nothing will ever be the same. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.
That was all. No explanation, no motive, no answers. The judge delivered the sentence with a steady voice, reiterating the plea agreement. 20 years to life for aggravated murder. 3 additional years for the use of a firearm. Served consecutively. Parole eligibility after 23 years. There is no guarantee of release, he clarified. Only the possibility, should the parole board deem it just.
and not provide any unnecessary burden on state or local resources. A period of incarceration is certainly necessary due to the nature of the offense and the loss suffered by all of the victims in this matter. I'm sentencing you to a period of 20 years to life on count 1, aggravated murder and unclassified felony. In addition, that sentence will run consecutive to the 3-year firearm specification, which is attached to that count 1. That firearm specification 3-year sentence must be served first, it must be consecutive, and it is in fact mandatory. This will make you eligible for parole, which there's no guarantee of that, at the earliest at 23 years, but you could serve up to life in prison for this matter. Do you understand all of that, Ms. Paschal?